after we get through the education part of everything,
What's
we'll
missing?
take a couple minute break.
Mike
Cut these guys.
and the elder.
If you're okay with that.
I am, and Ed Salmon
Ms.
said we're
McKee,
gonna
we're live?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. So we're going to call to order this meeting of the Education Committee. It is February 23rd. Welcome, everyone. If we would please start to my left, let's make some introductions.
Yota Piley School Board.
Bob Hickey, School Board.
I had to think about
Michael
it.
Roosevelt, School Board.
Ed Salomon, School Board.
Matt Frederickson, IT Director.
Joe Hidalgo, School Board.
Andy Sanko, Superintendent.
Nicole Crawford, Director of Elementary Education.
Good evening, Al Fong, Director of Secondary Education.
And Marion McKee, School Board. Thanks, everyone, for being here. We have some special guests who are going to help present tonight. We have 4 agenda items, starting with structured literacy. Mrs. Crawford, do I hand that off to you?
Sure, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to share some general information this evening regarding structured literacy, the science of reading, as well as the outcome of the pilots that were done this year related to 3 core English language arts programs. Joining us this evening, we have Mrs. Rose Burkhead, the District ELA Coordinator, Mrs. Kate Alberti, a 5th grade teacher at Churchville Elementary School, who also has a literacy background, Mrs. Danielle Lanzi, 1st grade teacher at Puno Elementary School, who also has a literacy background, as well as Mrs. Althea Tomlinson, Supervisor of Curriculum and Instruction. So I'm going to, by design this evening, provide a general overview about the structured literacy piece, the science of reading, and again, the outcome of the pilots that we did for 3 core ELA programs. I'm going to give general information, provide some background, but then at the end, we'll have an opportunity, of course, for questions to be asked. And that's where these folks will really come in handy because they were a part of the pilot this evening. So we're really looking forward to sharing what we have experienced this year, most importantly, the excitement around these resources. So I'm going to begin by displaying as Pennsylvania defines structured literacy. If you could just take a minute and read that, and then I'm going to proceed to provide some highlights and some important related information. Chapter 49 requires Pennsylvania school districts to establish a program of professional development and applied practice in structured literacy beginning in the 2022-23 school year. This includes the following: effectively teaching the reading literacy skills of phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. Differentiating instruction for students with advanced reading levels, as well as others who may have a language-based learning disability. Identifying and teaching students with dyslexia and other language-based learning disabilities using appropriate scientific research and brain-based multisensory intervention methods. Implementing reading instruction using high-quality instructional materials. Using developmentally appropriate supports to ensure that students can effectively read and listen and speak. Administering universal screening measures so that we can assess students appropriately. So looking at this definition and going through some of that related information, we were talking recently and when speaking with Mrs. Burkhead, we realized that she had a really great statement that encompasses all of this information for perhaps folks that are not enmeshed and embedded in this work every day. So I'm going to have you share that at this time.
Sure. Reading is not a natural process. It's actually a man-made process and it's very complex. So teaching reading is very difficult to do for our early learners, which is why we spend so many years teaching how to read. And speaking is natural. We've been doing it since the beginning of time. So our students are very much in tune with phonemes and sounds. we start the process of reading. It's through sound. So structured literacy really is taking those sounds, learning the sounds, and then associating them with a visual, a letter, and then building on all of that to become an increasingly strong reader by breaking that code.
So now looking at the science of reading. The science of reading is a vast body of scientifically based research about reading and issues related to reading and writing. This research has been conducted over the past 5 decades across the world and is derived from thousands of studies. The science of reading has culminated from evidence to inform how good reading and writing develop, why some students or people may have difficulty, how we can most effectively assess and teach to improve student outcomes. Literacy researcher Hollis Scarborough created a metaphor for explaining that complex process of reading. She described reading by comparing it to the strands of a rope, which you can see here. This graphic shows the rope's different parts and how they work together when one is reading. All of the components or strands together form what Scarborough calls skilled reading. Skilled reading happens when students are able to read text fluently while simultaneously comprehending. In other words, the different parts of the rope work together in tandem when a person is able to read and comprehend text. So there are 2 main strands, language comprehension and word recognition, that are woven together. Each main strand consists of smaller strands that represent reading skills as outlined on this slide. So with all of this background that I'm sharing, I'd like to move forward with sharing a little bit about why we're having this discussion this evening. So we last adopted a core ELA curriculum back in 2012. I was here in the district as a principal at Boudreaux Elementary at the time. Actually, that was the year Mrs. Lancy was hired. We reminisced about that earlier. And that edition is no longer being supported by the publisher. The materials embedded in the Journeys program are, quite frankly, they're outdated. What also happens when you have resources that are over a decade old, that many teachers, by design, start to supplement because of those resources being outdated. They start to, pull in other resources. But my concern in my role with that happening across 10 elementary schools is that you start to lose that consistency that I believe and we believe is very important when making sure that we have a solid, viable curriculum and program for our students. So that has started to happen in recent years. Starting last year, there was a group that came together under the leadership of Mrs. Burkhead, looking at new curricular materials for language arts in grades K through 5. We were looking for foundation programs with foundational literacy skills based in the science of reading, which I spoke about earlier, a clear alignment to the PA Common Core standards, updated resources that, of course, are updated and certainly supported by the publisher. And again, going back to that assessment piece, universal screeners that can help us best know where students are in their learning and how we can respond accordingly. Again, going back to the Journeys program right now, even some of those assessment pieces are outdated and teachers have started to pull their own assessments and, again, has resulted in a lack of consistency. So this current year that we're in, we had 3 different trials that were happening with a group of pilot teachers and staff that represented over 85 members of our district staff. We had 21 sections of the program MyView, which is grades 1 through 5, 28 sections of Wonders, again, a grade through 1 through 5 program, and we extended the use of Reading Horizons. It was 35 sections in total in grades K through 2. We were using Reading Horizons previous to this year as an intervention program, so we see that much of an extension, if you will, of what we were doing previously. We were already familiar with Reading Horizons. So I'm really excited to share a little bit about my personal experience learning and growing my own knowledge about these programs this year. I spent quite a bit of time getting into classrooms, observing lessons, talking with teachers on the committee, talking to teachers after these lessons were taught, and attending trainings, and of course, collaborating very closely with Mrs. Burkhead. And as a result of the work that this committee did, and again, later on, they are available to answer some specific questions if you have them related to what that work looked like as a committee, but definitely Wonders and Reading Horizons rose to the top based on the experiences of the teachers who piloted these programs this year. Just to highlight some important information related to both, Wonders is a program for grades 1 through 5. It's aligned to the PA Common Core standards. The resources are continuously updated and supported, and the materials are very, very good in terms of differentiation. It really helps with what I spoke about earlier, how we can, for example, extend our teaching for those students who need higher order thinking skills and need to be pushed a little bit more and extended and are reading at a higher level, but also for those students who need more support with their literacy. Professional development is also very, very good. Reading Horizons is a K through 2 program, and I do want to stress with kindergarten through 2nd grade, it is absolutely critical that those students receive the very best foundational literacy instruction, because that's what we build upon as they move through the grades as they get older. So we were looking for that strong foundational literacy-based program, and I have to tell you that I personally was in more of the Reading Horizons lessons and training. I've never in my 17 years in Council Rock have seen so many teachers and staff excited about the work being done and the professional development provided by the group that would come here very, very often to meet with staff. They were excited with the actual resources. The teachers kept saying to me when I'd leave, can we, make an appointment next week to talk some more about it? They were seeking me out so that they could share a little bit about their experiences, and really the same was with Wonders as well. And I'll take this as far as to say, even most recently at Goodell Elementary School, I went in for a Wonders lesson, and one 3rd grader said to me, I love this program. I asked my teacher if I could do a slide for you. And the slide, she presented it so well. It was from the heart, why she really enjoyed reading now. I was so excited that I asked Dr. Sanko to come over and also view it and be a part of that experience, so which he has also been, in classrooms as well, viewing and growing his knowledge of these resources. So there's been a lot of excitement. There's been a lot of good work done by these team members under the leadership of Mrs. Burkhead, and I'm really proud of this. And certainly anytime that we're talking about a change in resources, we recognize and appreciate any questions you may have. So just to review again, Mrs. Lanzi is a 1st grade teacher, so she piloted Reading Horizons this year, and Mrs. Chilberti piloted Wonders in 5th grade at Churchville. So prior to moving forward with any kind of questions, I do have the costs displayed on the slide here. Mrs. Burkhead has spoken with the vendors, and she also has some additional information related to different ways that this cost, it can be worked through and payment and such. So we can certainly go deeper into some of that detail if the board is looking for that. But I do want to just hit on one other thing. With any program, there are drawbacks. I certainly don't want to paint a picture here that they are perfect. In speaking with the teachers and with the staff involved in these, pilots, there are always some nuances. For example, many teachers that I spoke with said, it's a great program, but it could use some bolstering in this one area or with this one unit, or we found with these lessons. And our teachers do what they do best. They're resourceful, they make great instructional decisions, and then they supplement when needed. So certainly there are opportunities when that has to happen. And also we've reflected too that if we were to move forward with a new program in grades K through 5, there is going to be a transition for those students that did not experience those programs this year. But what we feel the benefit will be is, and soon we will realize, that common language is going to be critical. So the fact that we're going to be starting this work consistently in the primary grades and seeing that language and the approach to teaching, going back to the science of reading that I spoke about earlier, we feel that it will benefit kids greatly. So we certainly welcome any questions you have at this time. We know that we could not cover everything in one slide deck, so we appreciate any questions.
Thank you for that, Mrs. Crawford. And before I open it up to questions, I just want to note that Mr. Tate has joined us as well. So questions from the board, questions, comments? Yes, Mr. Roosevelt.
Is this, the Wonders program, is this published by McGraw-Hill?
Yes. it is.
Okay. And then, did they come out, I saw that it was a license for 6 years. Do they have a new edition every year? Or what is the most recent edition that we would be considering?
The newest edition is Wonders 2023.
Okay.
So any of the print materials would be Wonders 2023. It will be the last iteration of Wonders, but I have a letter from McGraw-Hill that says it will be around for at least 10 years.
Okay.
So we will be able to buy materials. That was one of the fears of the committee. Journey's materials have been out of print.
Yeah.
So that was hard to try and piece all that
Do
together.
they come out with an edition every year? Or do they do it like every 2 or 3 or whatever?
I mean, typically, I know their last edition was 2020.
All right, so maybe it's a 3-year.
3 years, but it won't go any further. That's what the publisher told us.
Okay.
But the materials would be available. The difference between 2020 and 2023 is some of the foundational materials that they have put into the program.
Yeah. Now, not going any further, does that mean that we're locked into the 2023 edition, even though it might be 2029?
For the 6-year license,
Right.
yes, we would be locked into the 2023 edition.
So if they came out with a new edition in 3 years, we don't have access to that.
No, but they won't come out with a new edition. The publisher had said that. This is it for Wonders. This is Wonders 2023.
Okay.
Wonders has been around for a long time. I want to say it maybe came out in 2014. I need to look it up.
Yeah.
We'll publish something else. So they don't have anything in the works. They really believe that this is their best and final iteration of Wonders.
Are they sunsetting Wonders then?
I wouldn't say they're sunsetting. They're just not doing another revision of it. I think it's been around for over 10 years. So I think at that point it would need to change names, much like Journey's finally sunsetted.
Okay.
The new program's called Interreading.
Okay.
And we did look at that Interreading as well.
All right. And then how often is it likely that a teacher might need support for this new program? Is that something that our teachers find that we need? Maybe, that probably means more to you than it does to me. But.
Professional development for
Well,
teachers?
Again, is this something that's electronically based, or is this something in physical form? Is there some correspondence that the teacher has to do between the 2 points, and maybe they have a technical problem, or maybe there's a lack of understanding for one other component, or they disagree with something? When you consider support for a program, does a teacher call up? Does a curriculum coordinator call up? How do you get that? What's the likelihood of us needing support?
I would say that honestly, the presenters and the people from the publishers have been very open. Like, reach out. We don't need to go through Mrs. Burkhead to reach out with questions. There are print materials and electronic materials, and it's very easy to navigate. That's one of the reasons why teachers really liked the Wonders program, because it's easy to find your materials. They have plenty of things to choose from, speaking to what Mrs. Crawford was saying in terms of like my lowest readers and my highest readers. There's plenty of materials, and they are print-based and they are electronic as well. And if you have questions, the company is willing to send them an email and they respond.
And to add to that as well is just that, our tech integration specialists, we spend time having them converse with all of our electronic resources so that they can support the teachers in real time in the classroom, helping them to teach a lesson with the electronic resource that we are providing for them. So in this particular case, it would be our elementary tech integration specialist that would learn
Yeah.
what this program is about, and then they would support the teachers in utilizing it
Yeah.
in the
Should,
classroom.
should this board be concerned that we're starting a 6-year license on a program that won't move forward after that? Or do we find ourselves in the same position that we're trying to replace?
I don't think we will. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that after a certain number of years, my opinion, although I don't know for certain, my opinion is such that probably a couple years ago, the district would have at least started the conversation about moving forward with a new program, because 10 years is typically too long. I think there was just too much going on a couple years ago to move forward in that direction. So there just comes a point for various reasons that you do want to look for resources and just to re-examine where you are, what you may need, and is it meeting the needs of students.
I can also say that it is typical for most publishers and resources, textbooks, to be on a 6-year cycle. Although they may release a new update, it's like it's very minimal in the change. It might be wording or a paragraph or an edit here or there. So like a next version, like if you had a 2023 and then they put something out in let's say 2025, there's a minimal change in the actual text resource. It's typically a 6-year. They're looking to really revise it over 6 years. So when we look at different resources, many of them come with a 6-year license for that purpose. for
Okay.
that reason.
And that brings my final question that I just thought of based upon your response here, is I understand that the 2020 version was considered to be bulky for both students and teachers, and that the support for the 2020 program wasn't as others, or wasn't what we expected. So if they don't change too much between 20 and 23, are we still stuck in that situation with it being bulky and maybe not having enough support, or are those concerns don't concern us? We've got that
In
covered.
this particular case, I believe that they have done some revisions as far as electronic resources, so that you're not going to find that it isn't as bulky. So, when they do make those revisions, and for them, it may have been a cycle of, although 2020 was a version, and then 2022, they may have made their bigger revision
Okay.
the year before. or
Thank
the
you.
Prior.
And I just want to add on with Reading Horizons, we've been working with them for 4 years. So we have been with that company. We know how they support you for life. That's one of their big missions as a company. They want to be your partner for the life of your product. And they have held true to that word. A lot of times you hear that and you're like, okay, yeah, see you later. They really have come through, and they're very supportive in everything that they're doing. So professional development-wise, it's really been impressive what they've been able to offer, as well as Wonders. And the other piece for professional development, a lot of it is online. You can do it on demand. There's videos made with people who have just shown you how to work some of the product, which is awesome.
So which are you recommending between these two?
So we are recommending both. So we can, and again, Ms. Burkhead can speak to that. So there was one program, mind you, that the committee did not feel was what they wanted to move forward with in terms of a recommendation. So although Wonders, there is a 1 through 5 program, and Reading Horizons is K through 2, that we understand there is that overlap with grades 1 and 2. Again, going back to what I spoke about earlier, that foundational literacy support that students in those early grades of K and 1 especially, but K1 and 2, it's critical that we have the best resources available. And as I shared earlier with Wonders, it's a very good program. It is what the committee feels is going to meet the best needs of our students. However, the Reading Horizons for that early literacy foundational approach is just bar none. And I don't know, Danielle, if you want to speak to that piece, why it's a little bit, different. I mean, again, there's a component in Wonders, but I'll let the team kind of speak to the difference.
Absolutely, thank you. To start, my students love the program. Our staff loves the program. And as Ms. Burkhead said, the trainings for the staff have been phenomenal, and I felt nothing but supported. and able to put forth my best to my students. And I really would love to see this continue to be offered to students in K through 2. That really is our primary years to hammer home those skills that they need to become readers and be successful in those upper grades. So I always think of it as in those primary grades, we're learning to read so we can read to learn later on. And the benefits of having 2 programs is that we are really getting the best of the best with Reading Horizons. We're providing them with that systematic process for acquiring these skills. The program is extremely interactive, and the students enjoy doing it each and every day and look forward to it. Over the years, I have seen a deficit in my students' phonics skills, and this year I feel much more confident in where they are currently at in the year and where they will end up by the end of the year. I love the consistency that this is providing to our students across the school and the language that we're using. I find it's critical as we have students going from Tier 2 to Tier 3 and different specialists throughout the building from special education and English language support. I feel that it is what we need now, what we've been missing over the years, and it would only benefit our students more to have these 2 programs available to them in the primary grades.
Danielle, can I put you on the spot for a second? For those that maybe are, again, not teaching and doing this work, can you explain what that would look like for you as a first grade teacher, having Reading Horizons, but then, you know, the Wonders piece to it too?
Absolutely. I've not yet had the experience of Wonders, but having been on the ELIF committee, I've heard all the positives out of this program. And as educators, we would look to tailor our instruction to include both, putting a heavy emphasis on Reading Horizons for our phonological, phonemic, and phonics skills, as well as incorporating many of the other core components of Wonders that it offers to support our students in writing, as well as reading, spoken language. And I really feel that it is doable to have 2 programs in the primary level where our students need the strongest foundation possible.
I'd add as well that when we're looking at 2 different programs, if you remember back with the Scarborough's Road, and there were 2 main strands. When you're looking at those 2 main strands, the word recognition is the Reading Horizons. That's the part of the foundational literacy. And then when you're expanding into comprehension and writing and more of the skills that are in English language arts, that's Wonders. And when you put them together, that's where you see that growth tying together to be that whole product of being able to not only read, but read and understand and comprehend.
Exactly. I think that really resonated with me as well in the model.
I know Mrs. Pauline and Mr. Hidalgo have questions.
This is more a follow-up. So can you give us maybe an example or some examples of each program, and also how an example of something that we're currently using that's going to change after we buy this? I mean, I know you deal with that every day. It's probably different for you, but I just try to illustrate a little bit more of like the change and give an example if possible.
So I can speak to that in terms of like a text analysis and analysis of what you're reading, and the kids have really, students have struggled with that over the last couple of years because we don't really have the support for that, and Journeys didn't really support how to analyze and how to break down the text. And Wonders, every day they're reading. One of their mantras is we read, we write, we read with a pencil. So they're constantly in the text, breaking it down, analyzing it, and going kind of beyond normal comprehension questions. And that ties into their testing that they have, where a heavy basis on the text-dependent analysis, where they have to analyze the text based on evidence. And we are pulling from the text every day. How do you know that? Where do you get that from? You know, it's not just their own background knowledge. They have to have support from the text, and they have to analyze it based on what they're reading and not kind of just what they know. And that piece has been missing, and that is something that has been very beneficial, just that one little difference.
And I would just add to that with the materials that we'll receive. Students have access to the materials online, so they can listen to the text. They have access to the text in an anthology, so a hardback. Those we would use year to year. And then they also have a reading writing companion that is their workbook. The reading writing companion has portions of the text printed right there for kids to read and annotate right there on the page, which I think is just so beneficial for our students. We teach that, and it's so important for the kids to actually be able to touch that text to do that. And I've seen that across the district. People are loving that feature. I think they're also loving the size of the book. It sounds silly, but in first grade or second grade, they don't know their numbers past 100. So if you give them a chunky book, that's really hard to navigate for a first or second grader. This book is like a horizontal page, so they have a wide landscape. It fits their handwriting, and it's small because there's a couple different units that they're working through.
And we started a new unit today, and my class was super excited just to get a new book in the middle of the year. They're like, oh, it's a new one. So that in itself was like refreshing for them. Not that that's a reason to buy for me. They were very excited about it.
Great.
And in terms of like the budget, so Wonders is 1.3 for 6 years, and then the Reading Horizons is that, and that would be a year for ever? I mean, do we have any specifics about that?
So Reading Horizons would be an annual cost for the print materials and for the site licenses. And we didn't really explain how a lesson worked. If you wanted to kind of hear how a lesson works,
Yeah.
there's the daily core 4 that the teachers go through on a daily basis. Do you want to?
Sure, absolutely. So each day we begin by reviewing the skills from the previous day, followed by our direct instruction. The students are very engaged in this multi-sensory process throughout. After the main instruction, we have an activity called dictation, where the students are learning through a variety of ways, including hand motions, writing on whiteboards, either small slate boards in front of them or around the room. And there is also an opportunity each day to transfer the skills that were learned. We are also building in additional transfer days to continue to work with small groups to differentiate where appropriate for each of our students' needs. And that's been one of the best parts of the program, is that it really hits all of our learners through that core 4 and ensures that there's opportunities to practice and extend through various activities. And we're just starting to get into more of that transfer and extension for our students. And they're very much enjoying that part of it.
So that cost would include a site license for each school. And in that site license, each child would have an account. Every day, they would go into their account and do some questions that would be a formative assessment. That information goes directly to the teacher. The teacher can then see if these children have it, they're going to work on this. These children need a little support, I'm going to work with them. These children already have it and need some extension, higher, I'm going to work, I'm going to give them necessity. So that's already generated in the program, and then there's activities that are giving kids instant feedback as they're working through. The print materials are, again, ways for the kids to transfer what they're learning.
My students so far have also really enjoyed that digital component. It's done through a lot of games, and they earn different tokens and stuff, and there's different little libraries that they can go into and read those devotional stories. And it's been enjoyed by them very much.
I would also, I just wanted to insert one thing that I forgot to mention is that, of course, if there's any board director that would like to come and see any of these lessons in Wonders or Reading Horizons, we absolutely encourage it, and certainly Dr. Sanko and I can work to set those visits up. Trust me when I say there are very willing participants to have you come in and so that they can show off some of the great work being done.
I would have a great match with you, Mrs. Crawford. And I wanted to also add, with this pilot, we have received a lot of free materials from the company. The training, the digital access, all of that has been at no cost to the district, and we have been able to train over 100 teachers in Reading Horizons. So the training has kind of taken hold. There's so much excitement around elementary, and it's just been absolutely incredible what teachers have done with this and how it just kind of keeps growing. I feel like we always talk about how the excitement's in the air with Reading Horizons and with Wonders as well.
And so there was a discount if we commit to multiple years. How many years would that be?
My thinking would be that we would put the two together and do a 6-year commitment, because we would be working on that 6-year cycle.
And do we know if Reading Horizons are going to change or do a new version or?
Yes, Reading Horizons is currently in version 8, and they are moving to version 9 next year. So everything that we have in version 8 will be swapped out for free to version 9. So version 9 has a lot of updates. It would take me a while to go through, but I would be happy to show you what version 9 looks like. It's exciting, it's empowering to teachers and students. It's really cool.
I think one of the best parts as an educator is that I've been able to provide my feedback to our trainer and said, this is what we need to make this functional for our students. And within a few days, there was changes. Something as simple as using slides to teach this material to our kids. We wanted the opportunity to be able to access these Google Slides and edit them so that they fit what we needed. And previously they had not offered that to teachers, and now they do. And that was just a matter of days that they provided that feedback. And as Mrs. Crawford shared, our literacy specialists have been working with Reading Horizons for years, and the relationship that they have built over those last 4 years continues to stay the same. They're a phone call away. They come in and offer coaching and feedback and modeling. And that's been invaluable to me as an educator to see this firsthand and have that opportunity to ask those questions that, I don't want to wait weeks to know the answer to. It's instantaneous. They are in real time, always accessible. And those video trainings as an educator, I go back to time and time again. They break it down by months. 1 through 3, 4 through 6, in where you are implementing. And each time I go on, I discover something new. And the next day, I want to try this with my students. And that's been, like I said, invaluable. And my students are reaping the benefits of that.
I mean, I can see how excited you are.
Oh, we would have had a packed house, so I'm telling you, there are very willing people to come and.
I would love to go and visit and see the action. I'm sure other people would love that.
And Mr. Hidalgo, question.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, yeah, I feel the excitement too, and I appreciate it. I agree, 10 years been a while for Journeys since even my graduate went through Journeys too, so it's been a while. And so in my 5th year in the board, this becomes actually really exciting when you get a chance to, sometimes it just goes right through and you don't get a chance to get involved. And I've found sometimes when we haven't done that, we've not been too happy with what has gone on. So I appreciate the excitement, the energy's there. I have a lot of questions because this is very new and I think it's important. I mean, I think you're on the right track, but I'm trying to just feel comfortable with what's going on. So how long was Kate, how long was the pilot for when you got the book? It was mid-year, or have you been starting the whole year?
I started that, but this is the only.
And then, but when they went to the new book, they were excited in the program.
So it's, each book is 2 units, so there's 6 units. So after the first 2, we finished, and then you move on to the 3rd, and they were just, they got a new book, they were very excited.
All right, so I'm on board. And then the Reading Horizons was more interactive. It was the kind of stuff you really like.
And that's at primary grade. That is so critical for keeping our students' attention and having them be interactive.
That's awesome.
Can you share what the interaction is? Because I was at the trainings, I've seen our kindergarten and 1st grade students do it. Share a little bit about, you're welcome to model it too.
Oh, sure. So we really do encompass all those different types of learning, from tactile tactile, kinesthetic, visual learners, auditory learners. It really hits all of those multisensory standpoints. So each day, as I mentioned, we start with that review of the previous day's skill or thereabout, and then we get into that main instruction, and my students are actively participating in the lesson, and they are so proud to say, this is phonemic skill 1, this is phonemic skill 2, and they're not guessing. They're able to have those skills to prove why behind the reading, why they're spelling something a certain way, and they're following those patterns that they've learned. We could be reading a journey story, because my grade level is still doing journeys, and they'll find a word and say, this one's following the R blend. I found 4 R blends on this page. And they're really transferring that to other areas. So going back to the second part of our core 4 is that direct instruction piece. That's usually about a 10 to 15 minute time. It certainly has its teacher-led moments, but the kids are constantly coming in and engaging with that. The next part, step 3, is our dictation, and that's where the students have some of the most opportunity to engage. So if you want to join me, we all put our hands, I want you to pretend like you're catching a beach ball from me, so you're going to start with your hands out. And as I give you a word, I will throw it to you 2 times, and then you'll throw it back to me 2 times. And this is their favorite part. If you ever see first graders that are uncoordinated, it takes us a few days to get this together, but once they have it, and I bring out the beach ball and everything, and really model that. But I could say, write the word cat, cat, and they give it back. Cat, cat, and I'll use it in a sentence. The cat is brown. And immediately my students, not even a second goes by, they're thinking about the skill that they just learned, writing that word, marking that word with the special marking system that Reading Horizons uses, and then I'll say chin check, and whiteboards go up right away, and I'm able to scan around the room, see who has it, who needs some support, and I'll say, okay, touched it, and read it twice, cat, cat, turn and tell your partner this in a second, ready, set, and hands go back up again. So they are really into this routine and the excitement that they have. We move on, and that dictation could be another, 5 to 10 minute activity, and then another great part of our day is that transfer, and that can look different. I continue to explore different ways to provide that transfer opportunity. Sometimes it's a whole class-led transfer card, where we're focusing on a specific skill for that day, going through practicing reading those words, because that's what we want them to be able to do, is to learn the skill and then apply the skill. And by doing that transfer daily, we're able to see who's getting it, who still needs some more support, and we're building in additional transfer days to remediate anything as needed. That transfer can also look like small readers that go along with the skill. It could look like individual transfer cards, and the kids love to play games with those cards. Teacher is a favorite one where we can partner children up and they can have different activities. We've also done some scavenger hunts where they pick one of our featured texts for the week, and if we're focusing on R blends, they go through the story and they try to find all the R blends and mark them, improve them, why is the vowel short, what does the diagraph say, all of those things. So that's been really successful and engaging, and the kids have fallen into such a really nice routine with this program, and my heart could just explode. It really was. They've done such a nice job with it. I'm very proud of them.
Thank you, Danielle.
Yeah,
That's
thank
really
you.
good interaction.
Yeah.
I got it. So I just wanted to follow up on what you were saying about wonders. Like there was a 2017 wonders, 2020, there's a 2023. I think they're going to do it every 3 years, and that's fine if you lock in for 6 because you don't want to keep switching material. If they're not going to do it anymore. She said they're not going to. They've guaranteed that they're not going to. They did 17, 20, and 23, and they're just stopping. Okay.
Yeah, the publisher said this is the last iteration
Of this.
And
Okay.
I can find out more information.
All right.
For you.
So, but that's K through 6, right? And we piloted one.
I'm sorry.
It's 1 through 5, but they do offer K through 6, I believe. Okay. So they do offer K through 6. We're just doing 1 through 5. Just mind, keep that in mind. And then for the Reading Horizons, is that also just K through 2, or are we only deciding to go K through 2, or do they go further?
So Wonders is K through 3. If we wanted to expand it, we could. As a committee, we decided K through 2 would be most appropriate.
Oh, you mean
Reading
Reading
Horizons.
Horizons? I got you.
Reading
I
Horizons.
got you.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
And Wonders is a K through 6 program. Our 6th grade is using collections right now. We're not ready to go through the
Okay.
cycle yet. Next year is really the time we need to look at 6th grade and choose a new
Could, okay,
material for them.
could that be squeezed in with them? Would Reading, I'm sorry, would,
Wonders.
yeah, Wonders be that one? Possibly, that's an option, obviously, I think. But I just want to try to stay on my thoughts, so, and I think I'm going to move to finances, even I don't want to, but I'm kind of like, I know we're pressed for time. The cost of, is it per student, per section? Because I can understand that for the price of, the 1.6 million over 6 years or whatever is 208,000 annually. And if you just look at the K through 2 program, or K through 2 program, it's 220 for, 3 sections versus, I guess it's 5 sections, the other one. So do you know how they come up with the pricing?
I do for Reading Horizons.
Yeah, like, is it per student?
It is a site license.
Site.
License is 12,000 per school.
Okay,
And then it is per section for classrooms. So it's, I don't have the breakdown of the cost per section, but for all of our sections, and I went off of the numbers from this year, it's $138,931.
okay, so I mean, you've been quoted for what our particular situation is, and that's fine. Then the only other question I think I'll have, and I'll let other people ask questions, is, could we pilot 1st grade with both? If we're gonna have overlap and use both 1st and 2nd grade, are we gonna pilot? Because, I mean, it's a lot of content, and I really don't know how you do 2 programs in 1st and 2nd. It's great to have it at your access, but if we're gonna be paying, $400,000 for those two, whatever it is, it's double the price for those 2 sections. Are we gonna utilize it and not just have it there, but it's really hard to get through all the content that we already have with just 1 program than to have 2 and to pay full price for it. That's the only question I have, from an economic standpoint.
That's a great question. So we decided early on when we had the 3 pilots going that it was not fair to have Reading Horizons and Wonders going together, or Reading Horizons and My View.
Exactly.
So no one was doing that together. However, once the ELA committee met, we meet monthly, we talk about what's going on, the status of the programs. When the conversation started to drift more towards Wonders, I had a lot of teachers who were piloting My View inquire about jumping onto Wonders, trying Wonders out. And one of the teams in 2nd grade at Goodnow, because there's so much excitement there, said, we want to pilot Reading Horizons too. So they are doing Reading Horizons and Wonders now. They started off with My View, and now they're doing both. So they are the people that I plan to really work with to see how we're going to make this mesh together. And I do believe that we can make it mesh together. Many districts in the area have gone with a foundational program as well as a core program in K through 2 or K through 3, depending on the program.
Well, I'm excited for you guys. I think you're going in the right direction. We'll talk as a board. I'd just like to know what we're paying, what we pay for I'm sorry, I get them all mixed up, Journeys, the last couple of years. If you don't know now, then we'll get it later.
Do you want to speak to, we actually looked up the
Good.
cost from when it
Oh,
was
look at
adopted.
this.
Do you want
Yes, so in 2012, we paid $850,000 for Journeys for 6 years. So that was over 10 years ago.
Double inflation.
Pretty hefty cost. And we pay an annual cost now for technology and for consumables.
Okay.
So there's definitely a cost that we've been paying per year since the 6-year license is expired.
That's okay. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for letting me talk.
Thanks for that. Other questions from the board? Questions, comments? Mr.
Mr.
Solomon?
Drake, you go first if he's got questions.
Mr. Drake?
You know what, I did have questions, and Joe seemed to cover most of them as it related to costs and what Journeys, was is what are we paying now currently for the Journeys program? You answered the question about, I wanted to know is anybody integrating both systems now, doing it? Obviously, yes. I mean, you can see he's excited about it. The one, I don't know, maybe it was answered and I missed it, for the Horizons. Is there an escalator, like it just says per year, as opposed, like what's that 208,000 turn into 6 years from now?
We'd get locked in. We'd get locked in through it.
Yes,
No.
I believe
So it's
it's-
like 912 for
How many
6 years.
How many years you have the contract, that's what you commit.
So we would lock in for X amount of years. And
And we
that,
would get a discount on top of it if we locked in.
Right. So with the discount, it's like 912, 30%. And then you've got for 6 years, that's like 912 plus that, it's like 2.2 million.
Right.
For 6 years for both.
yeah, it's about five. Okay. That's all I had. Thanks. Like I said, I can see the smiles on your face. It's good to see, it's good to see that you're excited about the program. I mean, some people who present, they're just giving information and facts. I mean, the three of you seem really excited about what you're doing. It's good to see.
Mr. Hickey, it's really great to see the excitement with the students too. So I do, again, just want to mention having any kind of visit to the classroom to see the students will be definitely worthwhile.
And Mr. Salmon, I think you had a question.
Yes, thanks. A couple comments and a couple questions. Nicole, when do you need a decision on those five?
Well, we would say sooner than later, of course, because of the planning, so this spring is what we talked about, because the sooner that we can have a decision that
So are
we
you
can
looking for
plan.
next month on?
I would say this spring, so in the next couple of months, Mr. Solomon, because
Right.
once we receive any kind of decision, that will inform whether we need to start looking at ordering, trainings, et
Yep.
cetera.
That's fine. I don't know if you want this next month on the agenda.
We can't be rushed.
No, and
No,
I do think.
that was my cause, because I'll make a statement first and I'll tell you. I heard somebody, one of you ladies over there, make a statement tonight, missing over the years. As a board member, I'm embarrassed to hear that. That should come to the board, that should go through administration. If you're missing something in the classroom, we need to know about it, and it needs to be fixed. There's no excuse for missing over the years, because that's my kids' years in school.
Different administration.
And I think I can speak to that,
Doesn't
and
matter.
I don't want to speak
Talk to
for
them.
Mrs. Lindsay, but perhaps what that means is when we're looking at updated materials that are available and some of the work that's being shared with the science of reading and everything I talked about at the beginning of this presentation, if you remember, I did punctuate earlier the importance of, we have teachers that are supplementing and collaborating and making sure our kids are still, receiving the instruction that they deserve with the resources that they deserve. But I think with that Journeys program, I knew what you were talking about. After 10 years, there were some outdated resources within it, but they're certainly resourceful, and I have no doubt teachers are going to continue to do that until they have what they feel is updated core materials to
Yeah,
use.
I'm a proactive person, so I'd like to know about what you need if you hear it, if I'm still here.
And Journeys had a
Please.
science program in it. It was just very minimal, just spent about 5 minutes a day on it.
I live Jersey.
Oh, yeah.
Now I'm living wonders.
Uh-huh.
I need a clarification. Sunset's 2023. What does that mean? Because I need to explain it to people when they call me tomorrow and saying, you're spending $1.2 million on a product that's expiring.
Yeah, I would not say that the product is expiring.
Bad word, okay.
I think in 2023, from McGraw-Hill's perspective, that this is the latest and greatest version of Wonders. They're very.
Can't do no better.
That's what they would say, and again, this is sales pitch.
Okay.
This is their most proud product, and I think, and don't quote me on this, but
I won't.
I know in publishing, you need to change the name of the product.
It's called marketing, yeah.
Right.
NFL does it every
That's
day.
kind of an education, I don't know all the marketing around it, but I can tell you that it will be around for 10 years, and it is a great Hyman
My
Jack-
daughter likes it,
Yeah.
that's all.
Okay.
One less argument in my house.
If we go this route and they come up with the next greatest one that they say that they're not going to come up with, is there any way that we can guarantee that we get the next greatest version?
Yes, I think there would definitely be a conversation that we can have. We're not going to settle for nothing, something that's not the best.
So I also noted that Reading Horizons has an Elevate or a next. Why didn't we look at that instead of keeping a consistency, which is the same question I asked when we were talking about 2 different math programs. So if Reading Horizons can do the soup to nuts K-5, why didn't we look at Reading Horizons
2-3?
Reading Horizons K-3, with structured literacy and the science of reading, that's where we see the most need. Our literacy specialists all have an Elevate kit and are using Elevate in intervention. I don't know if it needs to be used across the board for all students after grade 3, because the foundation should be built for how we learn to read.
So you're saying the Reading Horizons product's no good after 3rd grade, your opinion?
So I went to the initial metaphor of the rope. So when we're looking at Reading Horizons and Elevate, it's about that reading and decoding and word recognition. And so Wonders is looking at literacy and comprehension and writing, and it's looking at something different. Whereas Elevate, what that's doing is helping to remediate and help students who have not been able to, at that time, be able to understand words, word recognition, phonics. So it doesn't provide the same thing. Wonders provides something that's a little bit different than what Elevate would provide.
Okay. And then the last thing I'll leave you, because I want to research this a little further, including talk to the 5th grader really in depth. A group called Student Achievement Partners put out a very critical report regarding Wonders. You should read it. There's a lot of things in there that if they have problems with it, we need to get in front of it if this is what you guys think is the answer. They're very critical of Wonders. I don't know these people. I don't know if they're right. You work with it every day. But as I always say, I hear what you're saying. Show me the ones that don't like it. I want to hear from them. So I'm using this very critical report as my benchmark to say this is somebody that's saying they don't like it. So go through it. Get back to me, please, that you can discount some of the things you're saying, because some of these things are kind of how bridges roll out. Oh, by the way, there's consumables. Oh, by the way, there's this. Or by the way, the book is a little awkward. I rip pages out, as some teachers told me, and redo the book because that's not the way I teach. So if these folks are doing the job for us and being very critical of the product, read it, let's go through it, be proactive. And if you need something, please get it for the kids. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Tate, anything?
Thank you. Ms. Crawford, it's sort of interesting that reading has become a controversial subject nationally in recent years. And coincidentally, I was talking to someone who teaches education at the college level over the weekend who brought up that podcast, Soul Story. How does this curriculum that we're looking at compare to the curriculum that's been used in the past 10 years nationally? Does it represent a significant departure in terms of the concept and the strategy, or is it an improvement on what we've been doing?
I think we were talking recently about pendulum and how it swings in education, and I was giving an example earlier today about when I went through my undergraduate work many years ago. It all was about the language, and that was just a different approach, and you didn't focus as much on the phonemic awareness and the phonics piece. And I can remember my mother-in-law at the time, who was a 30-year teacher, veteran teacher, other veteran teachers in the school saying, "Oh, you wait. Pendulum's going to swing again. This isn't sticking. It shouldn't stick. This is just the newest thing." And sometimes that happens in education. And Soul the Story is just kind of cautioning that podcast, which I do think is really good for teachers, staff, community members, parents to listen to. It just cautions about, we've done things a certain way in education for years, and let's not necessarily throw away what worked in the past. And so this focus, again, on everything we've been talking about today and the critical need for building those foundational skills, especially at the primary level, is such an important focus that many parents that have contacted me about that podcast, as soon as I explain Reading Horizons, it's just a relief. It's, wow, this is what we're looking for our students. And it's not to say that we haven't done these components, but this systematic approach, this in-depth instruction, everything you heard tonight for those foundational skills is really critical, and we're passionate about that. But we also need to give our staff and our teachers the right roadmap. So again, they're resourceful, they're pulling great resources now, this good work's being done, but I feel strongly in my position that those teachers need that roadmap so there's consistency across the 10 elementary schools in these grades. So the podcast really lends itself to the discussion that we've had tonight.
Good. I heard you say consistency earlier when you were talking about as the curriculum became sort of outdated, teachers had to figure out ways to work around, which leads to inconsistency, which, there's a balance between consistency and allowing teachers to do what they think works. But this all makes good sense. Good. So in a way, it sounds like it's sort of back to the basics on the one hand, but it's incorporating the latest thinking in language arts.
I think that's a great way to capture it, Mr. Tate. That's a perfect way to capture it. It's getting back to some of those core foundational skills, but all the great instruction and work that's been happening too, and it's embedded in these programs.
Great. Well, I really appreciate the time and effort you all put in.
Thank you so much.
Great, so again, I'm batting cleanup here. I thank everybody for their participation tonight and the in-depth discussion. That was really helpful. It was also helpful to me to be invited into a first grade classroom this past week. And I saw a Reading Horizons lesson, and it was exciting, it was engaging, the students loved it, they couldn't wait to tell me what they were learning, explaining why they were doing things. It was very exciting, and I can see why this program, is so embraced by staff and students. So that was a wonder for me, if you don't mind me using that word. And we had the conversation as we were leaving about exactly what you said, Mrs. Crawford, about the pendulum swinging. And you pointed out that we're also being informed, not just by teaching strategies, but we're being informed by some very current brain research that should inform our instruction in the areas of reading. So it's only natural to me that we should be changing and adapting and using the latest research and techniques and technologies to help our students learn. So I'm very supportive of these programs, and I thank all of you and all of our staff who are working so hard on this. So I understand from our conversation tonight that there may be some questions that still need to be answered, maybe some more assurances about going forward with these programs. But I know too that there is, kind of a ticking clock if we're going to order materials and do training. So I'm not hearing a hard stop from anyone tonight. Is that correct to say? Okay, I'm not hearing a hard stop from anyone. So we're going to continue with the piloting, continue getting further information from the board, and we will be looking then in the spring if this can come before the board, if everything is satisfactory. Does that sound correct? And summing up, Mr. Hidalgo.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate that. So I heard two things that were really exciting, kind of the things that I've been talking about in the background here. Getting back to the basics, that's awesome, and consistency. As a parent, trying to empower the parent is what I'm voting for. That's what I'm pushing for, is to really get the tools and keep the parents engaged if they're willing. And if they are, they're the best partner that we could have. They are #1 teacher for life, right? So I want to gauge how we can test and we were going to talk about this next week, but I thought, now's a great time because we're talking about consistency, getting back to basics and empowering parents. It seems like to me the Google Classrooms is a very good tool that we can look and it's a record, and it's there for years, that shows what, we should try to get the teachers to make sure that they're putting the stuff into the classroom so that we can see that there's consistencies there. That's where the parents can see where the consistency is. Because it's really difficult for a parent to just swoop in, and if one teacher's doing it this way and another teacher's doing it this way, it doesn't have to be perfect. You said you've got to give latitude, professional discretion for teachers to teach the way that they want, but the school district should have some guiding live principles or something, because this way, because sometimes you want to go back 2 months and say, hey, I got to go back to this, and my son or my student didn't do well on that. Let's focus on this so that we can end the year strong. And that's where I think we need to look at use the Google Classroom or whatever it is. That's the only way we're going to map it out that I can think, unless there's another way to do it. And at what grade would you actually start using Google Classroom? I know by 3rd grade through 6th is no problem, but do we use it in earlier grades? And that's what I'm thinking. Are we doing it in 1st grade, right? It's amazing. So that to me seems like a really good tool where we can find consistency by using that. So that, I mean, whether you're using the to-do list or not using it, is the homework in one section or is it split up amongst everything? It's a lot of work, but I think if people all get consistent with that, it's a great tool to keep the parents engaged and on top. But if they're spending half their time trying to figure out where everything is, it's very difficult. So I just wanted to throw that in there for everybody.
Great, thank you.
Thank
Ms.
you.
Pell, you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, so you said you're piloting both programs in, like, is it one classroom or maybe several classrooms?
I can go back to that slide.
Yeah, and I wonder when you're gonna have the results of that, when you try to see how the two work together well, and if you recommend sticking with that recommendation or maybe changing it. Do you know when you're gonna be done with that?
I am very confident that it's going to work because it's worked in other districts. I've already started to work with Reading Horizons on taking the scope and sequence and aligning it into Wonders, so we at least are started down that road. So I don't know exactly in Council Rock because we just started with that process, but I am confident that we can make it work.
Ms. Polly, if you were asking, this at the bottom here does show how many classrooms were a part of the pilot for all 3 programs, but I know you asked about Wonders and Reading Horizons.
So the 35 is, they do both Wonders and Reading Horizons?
I think you were asking about the combined, and
Oh, the
you
combined,
talked
my
about grade
apologies.
2
Okay.
at Goodnow.
Yeah,
Grade 2 at Goodman.
okay. And that's going well?
Yes,
Yeah.
so far, they just switched. The other thing I'll say, everyone who's doing Reading Horizons is still implementing Journeys. So we know that 2 programs can work. We just have to figure out how these 2 programs can work.
Thank you.
Okay, it looks as though we've concluded this topic. Yeah? Once again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, ladies.
We have a couple of other items on And next up.
Yes, thank you.
Knowledge.
Thanks for knowledge.
Thanks for knowledge.
I will try to tap my inner elementary enthusiasm. Having spent the majority, well, no, the entirety of my career in secondary education, it may be difficult, but it is, I do appreciate it. I always appreciated that about my elementary instructor. Their enthusiasm in front of 30 students, they just go at it, they're passionate, and you have to admire that. So another point of pride, Knights for Knowledge. We've spoken about Knights for Knowledge often, so this is just a quick status update. As of 42 minutes ago, we completed our 7th session at Knights for Knowledge. As you know, we have 15 programs scheduled and started just after the new year, January 5th. We will continue every Thursday until April 27th. We do have a night off, and that is April 6th. That is spring break week, so we will not be in session for that Thursday. Just a couple updates on parent communication. Our instructors are emailing the parents every week about what the content area is that's being covered in that particular session. So hopefully, when students come home, parents inevitably ask the question, what did you work on tonight? Nothing, I don't know. At least the parent has a little bit of substance in order to kind of counter that conversation. Attendance, and we knew this to be the case, this is evening school. In terms of motivation for students, we have to remember they have completed a full academic day. So this is from 6 to 7:30 at night. So 70% attendance actually is decent. And we know that Mrs. Gina Booth, who is facilitating the program, she's very much trying to incentivize and motivate our young students to be there. So I've seen her have some giveaways and prizes and spirit nights, and she's always conjuring up new ideas to kind of keep that forward momentum. So far, so good. In terms of another iteration of the program that we're proud of, and I'm proud of the program because we have just about every level of the school district represented, right? So we have the elementary students, and then we have our middle school students, our high school students are acting as tutors. And as of 2 weeks ago, we brought in our senior adults for greater education, SAGE volunteers. We have 11 volunteers, and they will be with us for the remainder of the program. And they are assisting, just like the high school tutors are, in the classroom with the math computation skills. So far, I think everybody's enjoying the experience. So we're really running the full gamut. We have a full spectrum of life experience at Hillcrest Elementary on Thursday evening. So that's good stuff.
Just one quick question.
Yep.
The attendance, can you tell me how it's trending?
I think it's been fairly consistent, to be honest
Great.
with you.
Yeah,
70%.
Like I said, it says an average. I just want to make sure it's not going from like 75, now it's down to 60. And
No, we're not seeing that
Great, and that's
negative
good.
trajectory. However, we had some conversations about the upcoming spring. Sun's out a little bit longer, soccer and baseball practice and things of that nature. So there is the potential that we might see it, but we hope.
I think
7 weeks already, I mean, anything's a plus. It's well worth the investment.
I think the first percentage we flashed in front of you on the screen was 72% after our first night when we started in the winter.
And just finally, just about progress monitoring, we want to make sure that students are progressing, that it's worth it. We're going to invest the time and money in this program. We want to make sure that we're getting a return on our investment. So students are completing 8 sessions of 2-minute check-ins to test computation. They do 4 15-minute check-ins on concepts and applications. Additionally, they are participating in that. It's kind of a universal screening test for math, Acadians it's called. And our 3rd, 5th, and 7th graders are participating in those assessments. So Mrs. Booth said that she'll probably have results that we could share in March, just in terms of how students are progressing on both the universal screening assessment as well as the check-in computation and application.
Mr. Hidalgo?
Thank you. Attendance, thinking back to attendance for a second, it was 69%, but that's of the people who were invited or of the 69% of the people who said we're coming? Because you can invite somebody, but that doesn't mean that they're actually agreeing to come. And do they get dropped off if they're not agreed? So I'm just wondering if there's a clarification.
So it's of the people that are...
Who are coming, and actually Mrs. Booth, she really thinks of everything. She noticed after a couple weeks, maybe the first 3 weeks, that there were certain students that just had not shown up at that point, and she didn't want that to negatively impact or skew the results of the percentage for attendance. So she did call those families, and some of them said, we signed up and things changed and we can't come. So she then took them off the roster. So she is looking at that piece too to make sure we are getting accurate. We don't have anyone on there that signed up and just hasn't come yet. So she's constantly looking at the rosters.
As Mr. Hickey said, anything is great, so this is awesome that we're doing it. And I think we're getting good amount of kids in there. Are we continuing to open it up? And really, we're hoping, obviously, if we're at 69%, we want to invite more children that need help into the program. I mean, it's like free tutoring. It's amazing.
The open invitation still exists, and we
Okay.
have had students who have jumped in midstream, so that continues to be available.
Awesome. Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Roosevelt?
Just
Mr. Solomon?
Just two comments, just to jump on what you just said, Al. I think that's important. It's available. We'll take people that the principals or the grade level people, teachers, whoever, team, feel need to go there. We've done it. You guys have a nice family out that actually put on Facebook looking for a tutor. So I sent a text to mom, is your kid going to Knights for Knowledge? She said, I don't know anything about it. So Nicole got that kid into it, which is great, because I don't know why they didn't know about it. I'm not here to talk about that, but that kid's in the system, working and doing well. I will say this as a parent. The quantifier you'll never find is getting rid of frustration and making a kid able to sit there and do something they haven't done. You won't be able to quantify that. I will tell you, I have a 5th grader that got her first 100 math test this year. I don't know if it's Knights for Knowledge, but I do know the frustration is dissipating. It's going into other areas. Social studies, she got 100 on her district level test. I hope she's not listening because she'll be very mad at me. But that's the thing that you won't capture in a box. And that's that little bit of that the way that Gina's done it, and I was amazed as you all walked through there. It's fun. It's a club over there. Everybody knows everybody. They come in orderly, leave orderly. But you're building that level of whatever word you want to throw in there, but you're removing the frustration. And that's the type of work, return on investment, you'll never capture. I will tell you as a father, not only do I appreciate this, but this is something that we don't want to ever miss. And we didn't miss it. We jumped on this opportunity to do this. So my hats off to that entire team over there, because one proud father here.
Great.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Roosevelt?
Yeah, I'm happy to hear about the positives, both from the parent side as well as the student side and the administration side. So my questions are, what's next? Have we thought about expanding this program to grades higher? Have we thought about expanding this program to different areas? Have we thought about looking at the lessons that we've learned to have this positive culture where kids are excited to be there, at least the 70% of the 10, and seeing how we can incorporate that back into our math program? Are there lessons learned? I'm really excited to hear what the results from the evaluations, because I think that's going to really help. But it sounds like they're probably going to be positive. So I'm interested to know, how can we make this better? How can we get this across the school? And when do we know that we're done?
Great question. Because I think it brings up a larger question, right? So, at the high school, they go to school from 7:33 to 2:15, and that's our bellwether, and that's our concentration, whether it's middle school or elementary, bell to bell. That's where we want to get the work done, and that's where the majority of interventions take place, even as the academic day ensues. This program's been one of them, increasing time on task, just having it in maybe an environment that's maybe not as pressurized, having small structured classrooms. Those are all equations for success. When you look to expand the program, and we've had conversations like, okay, are there other subject areas that we might be able to capitalize on? Are there other grade areas? The larger question becomes, are you ready to do school more, not 24/7, but it becomes, you want to do it on Saturdays? Do you want to do it 2 nights a week? Do you want to, and I don't know the answer to those questions. Those are questions we all grapple with. Our next iteration, if you will, of kind of this, where we go next, we already have it, is the Summer Academy, but Mrs. Booth, who also facilitates the Summer Academy, I think the work that she's done for Knights for Knowledge is only going to enhance what she's doing for the Summer Academy. That's been our planning and preparation kind of the last month, is getting that ready. And, I know our numbers have kind of gone up. They're not where we want them in the Summer Academy, but they've gone up pretty dramatically. I think that we're going to see that continue to grow. So that's a positive. I don't know if you want to speak to any other.
Yeah, I think some of the other things, just to kind of add on to what Al said, some of the work we've asked Tom Barnes to do, will tie right into this, because we want to drill down and see if we can find school-to-school, student-to-student, comparable districts. That's the work Tom's doing now, looking at comparable districts. And is there anything we can learn from that to arm our teachers with to do the remediation or enrichment during their typical school day? Because ideally, we want to give our teachers the information and the tools to help kids between that, 9:10 to 3:40 at the elementary level or whatever. So I think that's where we're going with that. And we'll have him back to talk about, we're starting to see some things that, we may be able to identify, whether it's a subject, if it's geometry, or if it's mixed numerals or whatever. And then that's information for us. And that's really what we want him to do. Find something that we need to get better at. Make sure our teachers have that information and arm them with that so that they can help the kids during the regular school day.
Right, because we had, 300 kids that we recommended for this, roughly, and not all of them joined, so we were down to 200 and something or another, of which only 70% show up, right? So we're dealing, but we've got just shy of 2,000 kids in middle school, if you consider north and south. So, that's sort of where my question goes, is are we really doing enough to both remediate from learning loss and get those kids back up to speed, but then can we expand to get more kids out of basic and into proficient in this area, as well as looking at what Mr. Barnes is looking at?
Well, I think that's why it's important for what we're going to learn from Tom, because we know we have a captive audience during the regular school day.
Right.
At night, we've invited 300-plus students, and we've had another 10, 20, 30 students whose parents wanted them to jump on. That's only a small fraction of the students we work with every day. So if we could take those learning opportunities and put it into the school day where we have a captive audience, those kids are with us, and then we can employ it during the day.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That's exactly what I wanted to hear. I mean, that's what we're supposed to do, is get them in there. But we're trying to, at the same point, respond to the situation that we're in. And I would submit, I think it's beyond math. It's, it also concerns ELA, and there's a lot of other areas. So, and I'm not convinced that it stops at 8th grade. I mean, I would submit that anybody that was in K to graduating college, in that time span is probably run a risk of losing something somewhere. And so we're recognizing that, and we're doing something to combat it and bring kids up. I think it's beyond that. So, yeah.
Just real quickly, I think this is marvelous. I wish we could reach more kids, but obviously we're reaching a fair number, and it's a wonderful extra thing that we're providing. Are we going to survey parents?
I don't know where, I know you all spoke with Gina about that. I don't know where we.
Yeah, I believe this does have plans for some sort of survey, but I think probably both student survey and parent survey.
Yeah,
We talked about student as well.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to get their perspectives on a lot of things, including the logistics, thinking about single parent, an evening thing, it's sort of tough. So credit to those parents who do get their kids to Knights for Knowledge. That's another positive.
Yeah, we really hope this springboards us into the summer academy.
Yes.
Last year we had 500 some students attend summer academy. Al said that was a huge increase over from what we had several years ago. And Mr. Roosevelt, to your example, 2,000 middle school kids, 5,200, 5,400 elementary students. So, while 500 is a great number, if we can get parents and kids involved in that, we welcome all comers.
It's a great staff too. I just want to acknowledge the teachers, and many of them that are teaching for Knights for Knowledge are also Summer Academy staff as well. So I think that's nice for any parent who has had their child a part of Knights for Knowledge. There's likely going to be familiar faces for the Summer Academy as well, which is nice for consistency.
Anything else on Nights for Knowledge?
So, I mean, it sounds like a great transition from that to the summer academy. I don't know if there is a way for us to make more kids sign up, advertise and make it more enjoyable. I don't know how.
For Summer Academy.
Yeah, summer academy. Because in the summer, that's when a lot of the kids forget some of the skills if they don't work on them. So I don't know how we can make it more attractive. Sort of ways to do
Yeah,
that.
it's challenging, I mean, because there, as Al mentioned earlier, there are competing priorities. People in the summer are gonna be going on vacation, going to the shore. As we get more daylight and the temperatures warm up, students are gonna be playing soccer and baseball or whatever they do as their activities, so and hockey. And you can play that all night, every night, right? But, so it's gotta fit the schedule of the family. But we're putting it out there, and as Nicole and Al said, we're gearing up for the summer academy, and hopefully we'll see growth in that.
I just want to point out, the thing that I think you said that was the most important, though, like, even though we're doing this, and it seems to be working well, you had said, like, maybe there's things that we're finding out with Nights for Knowledge and the Summer Academy that work, that we can incorporate into that 9 to 3:30 class, where you don't need to do the, down the road, that we don't need to do this, or we can always expand on it in some way. But like you said, I like that part about you said, hopefully we can find those strategies that are working, that are going to help those kids. Because like you said, you're not going to get everybody. I like the idea of the captive audience. Hey, this works. Let's see if we can make some improvements. That was the best part of what you said.
Yeah, Mr. Hidalgo.
Yeah, so we're on Summer Academy. Is that like ESY, like 5 weeks? Or how many weeks is Summer Academy for?
3 weeks.
3 weeks, okay, because I was gonna say, that's doable, 3 weeks. Maybe somebody just wants to do 1 week, and you can say this is the booster week. Can they pick 1 week to do? If they can't commit to 3, that might be too much. But if somebody says, you get that one little remediation segment in the middle of the year, preparing for next grade, reviewing. And of course, again, the online tools they have. Khan Academy is free. And you can do an assessment before you're going into 4th grade, and it's a wonderful, wonderful automated tool. Things like that. Okay. So, thank you.
Great. Thank you for that.
Okay, moving right along, our last topic of the evening before the board discussion. Again, we've talked about this a number of times in terms of pressure points at the elementary level with some enrollment issues. So, in particular, Wrightstown Elementary School. So just to give the board an update of kind of where we are recently, we have re-engaged our district demographer, Mr. Matt Cropper, and what we asked him to do, and he terms it geocoding. So geocoding is essentially looking at that, in particular, that Wrightstown catchment area, and then really getting granular with the data. So you drill down to the individual houses and individual neighborhoods, and how many student occupants and which grade levels. And that's important information that Mr. Cropper is going to give to us, because then we can take a look at, because when you look at it, and I think we've had this discussion before, elementary enrollment issues, a lot of it is about how many sections in a particular grade level. So you really need to know how many 3rd graders are we talking about, how many 5th graders, because when you start what we term breaking sections, do you have 2 classrooms of 3rd grade, or do you have 3 classrooms of 3rd grade? So that's the look that we've asked Mr. Cropper to kind of provide for us, and he's getting us that data. So our hope is that we can analyze that data, and then ultimately our objective will be to put forth 2 or 3 options for the board to consider as early as next education committee meeting about how we might remove some of these pressure points.
Great. Questions or comments, Mr. Hickey?
You said Welsh, well, what about Holland?
Did I say Welch? I meant Wrightstown.
I mean, Wrightstown, sorry, excuse me. You said Wrightstown, what about Holland? I mean, isn't there pressure points there as well?
Yeah, there are pressure points in Holland too. So I would say
It's kind of been one and one day. We've been looking at Wrightstown, and we're also taking a heavy look at Holland Elementary School.
Okay.
Absolutely.
We have some ideas for Holland that would not be for next year, possible ideas, but would be for the year after. But again, the Wrightstown piece is, again, it's a great way to put it, one and one. We're talking about both. But Wrightstown, we're looking more for the beginning of next year, just to give some relief for, again, specials that are displaced right now. What can we do short term, which we talked about last education meeting.
There's two distinct differences between the schools, and that's the battle that I'm sure you folks are having. Holland has 30 elementary classrooms that are, and 18 of which are full size. The other ones aren't. So even if you say we can relieve some pressure points, and we've talked about this, you don't have a full-size classroom because of the way it was built and remodeled in 2013. So that's a totally different animal from what we've seen on Wrightstown. So I'm looking forward to hearing these options. I think we could talk about this all night. I mean, there's some legitimate concerns. If you look at those schools, how are you going to do it? So I'm looking forward to hearing.
And what we know that's finding are the number of full-size classrooms in each of those two buildings.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so that's the non-negotiable that we have to work with. That's finite. We know we have 17 full-size classrooms at Wrightstown. And then, we're looking forward to hearing back from Matt Cropper with the granular data, and then give you some options and give our parents and community in those two schools some options as well.
Yes, Mr. Rizzo?
I just want to compliment you for both approaching this and giving us a heads up. I really like it. I think that I'd love to actually see this for all committee meetings, where you can say, this is what's coming up next. Stay tuned, right? This is our next month thing. Thinking about, our first topic of ELA, a lot of us didn't know anything about this until earlier this week when we see the updated board docs. It would have been wonderful if we had a similar thing to what you just did to Wrightstown for that last education committee, so that we have a little bit more time to be thinking about things. And frankly, I think that there's elements of this that happen in a lot of committee meetings throughout the year. It would be great to sort of have, I realize you can't capture them all. Sometimes things come in, but I think that we can reduce maybe some of this surprise element to it. But still, I realize that you can't do it. I just really liked how that went, where you gave us a little bit of information and you said, hang on, we got more coming. And hopefully that gives a light at the end of the tunnel to all the families at Wrightstown that I know have been struggling with this for at least a year, 2 years. So that's great. I'm hopeful that maybe we'll get a lot more families involved in that meeting. And if we're sitting in this room to have public comment, that would be great. So I'd like to see that on a lot of different subjects for a lot of different committee meetings.
Mr. Hidalgo?
I'll just say, it's good. I understand what you're saying too, but in this particular case, I think that we're not being asked to make a decision, which is great. And if you're waiting this is I was mentioning to him that today was the best curriculum review that I've had in the 5 years that I've been. Like, it felt organized, it was great, well presented, it was good energy. It's just, but if you wanted an answer today, you're not going to get it, right? But it's fine. I don't think that was what we usually do it in the spring, like you said. So good job.
Yeah.
But I always like that forward thinking. But then again, things are going to come up that we're not. We're all trying to tread water here, and you're doing a great job. So thank you.
So seeing nothing else, I think that concludes all of our topics for the Education Committee.
Mrs.
And
McKay, may I?
Yes, please.
So I would suggest that we open up public comment to the subjects, and our solicitors here, to the subjects we spoke about, and the next topic ahead of it, correct? So if there's anybody from the public who wants to speak about any of the topics we discussed now, and then the next topic we're going to be talking about is filling the vacancy of Region 9.
Great, thank you for that.
I didn't know if you were ready to do that, I'm sorry.
That's good, thank you. Public comment? And seeing none, that makes it easy. We're ready to move into.
28 seconds.
Did you get the? What? Take a little break.
That's so nice. Yeah.
Pause it?
Take a break?
Well, we have to.
We're citing stage here.
I don't have a choice.
Yeah, we're going to keep going. Just, guys, relax. I hope everybody knows that.
We're all leaving, we're not talking about this.
told her that you've been trying, I'm trying, I tried somebody today.
That's all we can do.
You're unmuted and back to live.
90% of my friends
All right, welcome back. We are reconvening the meeting. This is the continuation of a discussion piece that we had at last week's school board meeting. I'm Ed Salomon. You can't see me, so I might as well identify myself. This is a discussion for the open vacant seat for Region 9. As I said, we mentioned last week during the school board meeting that the board would reconvene next week or tonight to discuss this process further. So at this point, we have in the room with us as well as Mrs. Heverly, the board secretary, and we also have Ms. Summers from East Bergen Gray, our solicitor, to come up with a process in an open forum, open discussion, full transparency for the public and the applicants can hear. Stated things, we have 4 applicants for next week. This board needs to interview all of them. The process in the past has gone pretty consistent. Mr. Tate, you can jump in because you were part of this. We bring the applicants to a table. In this case, it's 4, which is usually, this is different than what it's been in the last 3 times this board's had to appoint somebody, in which it was just 2 applicants. So the first thing that I'm thinking is, how do we structure this meeting for next week? My sense is we bring 4 people in, give them the rules that we come up to this evening, and then we can either ask for 3 to leave and just start the interview process with that 1 applicant. This is where the board's got to chime in. How many questions do we give? How much time do we allot at that point? And then move to the next applicant. So I'll open.
All right, thank you. I'll make 2 simple suggestions. One is I think we have to draw lots for the 4 candidates to see the order that they go in. Just numbers out of a hat kind of thing. I seem to recall doing that. And the other thing I would suggest is that the board asks questions in alphabetical order of the board members, and we just keep rotating that way.
First name or last
name?
You would go
last letter, first letter.
We would be stymied. I think we better go with last name.
Does anybody have an issue with?
I would say just maybe just how we're seated would be a little bit more orderly than figuring out whose name is what. Otherwise, we sit in alphabetical order. That would just be my idea.
I personally, are we going to ask each person 8 questions? Like, I don't think we should have to come up with 8 questions just so everybody gets to ask a question. Like, for example, if there was only 6 questions, I would be more than happy to keep my mouth shut and not have to ask one. And I think everyone should, if we're going to ask the same question, I think each person should ask the same question of each candidate. Like whether or not, I don't know whether they're all going to be in the same room at the time, or we're going to go one at some we'll have to discuss. Are all 4 people going to be sitting at a table and we just round robin them as we go? Or is we're going to ask 1 candidate to stay, the other 3 leave, and we ask them all the questions that we need, at least for, like, say, a round 1?
Yeah, I think Ms. Summers has an opinion about the sequestering of the candidates.
Well, I think that it's probably easier if the candidates are sequestered and come in 1 at a time. I don't know that there's any particular procedure, but we want to make sure that there isn't any favoritism. So drawing lots is a good way of doing that.
Can I just I'll throw my ideas out there real quick.
Please.
I talked to
Mr.
Mike
Lott.
Roosevelt called me today about it. So draw the lots. There's 4 candidates. The other 3 are sequestered. Please, no cell phone use. Just you're going to go and take your turn. 4 people go. I think we should ask the candidates the number of questions they need. Limit the time, whether it's 60 seconds or even if it's a minute and a half. First round is going to take about 15 minutes. Okay, that's not a big deal. We can do. No, I'm just saying 8 questions, a minute and a half. That's a matter, I would say 8 minutes and a minute, 8 questions and a minute to answer. But then we're gonna have, so whatever it is, it's gonna be 8 or what's it, 12 maybe minutes of first
Yeah,
round?
that wasn't my suggestion.
No.
I didn't want to go on, but what my thinking was.
So we're gonna do lots, I think we're all good with that.
Yes.
I'm just making a checkbox.
Yeah.
sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. And sequester. we're good with
Sequester,
that.
Yes.
yeah.
Now I think we're,
So-
how do we?
So my thought, my thought was 15 minutes each, and however many questions fit. Like candidate 1 might only get 3 questions, because that candidate spends 15 minutes answering those 3 questions. Candidate 2 might answer 3 questions and have 5 minutes left. But
I gotcha.
But then wouldn't that mean that some board members don't get to ask a question? If let's just say you, me, and another board member ask complex questions and the candidate takes a long time to answer, then Mr. Hickey and Mrs. McKee don't get a chance to ask.
Yeah, and if I really wanted to ask a question of candidate C,
Right,
how do I get to do that? I don't know.
right, right.
Can I finish what I was gonna say anyway, just so I can finish? Okay, so let's say you get to the goal is either we're gonna, when we get through all the candidates, I think we should all just ask at that point one question. Do you have somebody that you could pick right now and see if we can get it done after everybody's had equal chance on the first round? If not, if there's not 100%, then we really wanna just say, hey, are we gonna decide now we'll take the top 2 after we do our little wait? Because they're all gonna have to try to weight them somehow or another. I think that's important. And then once we're there, now we're back to what we've all seen before. 2 candidates at the table, sitting side by side, and then we do what we always done, and then we're back to where we were. But I think that would be the goal, either get to 2 or to pick one after we all get that one chance. But to go down to 3, it's like, we're really, I mean, it might happen, so we may have to be prepared for that also.
In looking into this further in terms of using any kind of a rubric, I have concern well, first of all, I think the rubric that would be used would be subject to a right to know request. And that would mean that everyone is subject to a right to know request. So I think that presents, it's not that we're trying not to be, we want to be transparent in this, but I would not recommend using a rubric.
I'm with that. So then that takes that off the table.
So what do you recommend instead?
I think, I hate to keep saying it's up to you guys, but it really is. I think if you ask your candidates, each ask the candidates questions, there being, a certain period of time for each candidate. After the 4 candidates have been interviewed in round 1, you would certainly see whether there is sufficient support to vote on a candidate, make a motion with a second, and then see what the votes are. You could also make a motion to eliminate 2 candidates, so that on a second round, you are interviewing only 2 candidates. So you can do it many ways.
So if there's a sorry, Joe, if I could, if there's a motion, if a motion goes through, gets seconded, we would do a roll call on that candidate. If that candidate does not get the 5 votes, would they be eliminated?
Yeah. So they're not going to get the 5.
But then depends who is gonna.
Well, I think that
be
there's
first or
always-
second or third or fourth. That's not fair.
Yeah, I think there's always compromises that are made during the course of your discussions on different candidates.
How about can we rank the top 2? And if whoever has to, we're gonna have to say names. I don't even care. We'll just have to say our top 2 preferences. The only problem I have with that is if he says something and it affects other people, board members, so I would like a private ballot so that we can say it But read them. I mean, it's
You
public.
can't, you can't have a private.
What I mean is when I say this, you give her your list of top two. Otherwise, you're gonna have to ask me first. I'm gonna say A and C. And now that might affect somebody else's, but that, if that's what we have to do, that's fine.
I thought, go ahead, sorry.
Sorry, to me, and we've been through this a number of times, the only difference I see this time is that we have 4 candidates. That's the only difference. So I think in recollecting, and Joe, you sat in front of us, and how this is done, it is done very publicly, and it can be very uncomfortable for all involved, but it's done publicly, and we discuss publicly, and we begin to make our positions known publicly. I don't want a paper ballot, I don't want a rubric. We have to do it in front of the public and make our decision in front of the public. Now, so the only issue is 4 instead of. Yeah.
So one of the, and listen through, let me get my thought out, hopefully you understand it. So if you look back to when I was appointed, you've.
A great day.
It was a wonderful day. My kids are there, they love me, they were counting, and thank you.
You're welcome.
You folks answered, you went around.
Yeah.
I got 2 questions. And then Mr. Block went around the room again and said, now, I get it was 2, but you can do it with 4.
Yeah, do you have a preference?
If you have a preference at this
Yeah.
point, can we keep a score at that point, or Donnie can keep a score of so-and-so has 3, so-and-so has 2? But where do we go from there? It's kind of where I'm stuck on it, having 4.
Right.
Well, that preference, you can write that down, because that is a preference that's been expressed. It's just writing down, but it's not a secret
No.
that it's preference.
But to my point earlier, if there's 5 people that comes out and says candidate A is my preference, well,
It's over.
that's a
Well,
no.
then there would have to be a motion to approve candidate A
Okay.
and a second, and
Okay. So that's why I say, so everybody just, at the end of the 4 candidates, we all say, who are your top 2 preferences? Just at this point, after 4 candidates. And then if we have 5 that say yes, then put it to a vote. If there's not 5, then we continue to work with the top 2 people.
We could go to the top 2 right after the first.
Okay, that's,
Well, those are my 2 questions, I think, after listening to this conversation. Number 1 is, do we have to ask each candidate the same questions in round 1 or in all rounds? That's the first question.
There's nothing like that.
there's nothing in the code that says what questions you have to ask. It's just a matter of what.
This is not an HR function.
Yeah, that's what I remember
It's the beauty, it's not the beauty of it. Yeah.
from Dr. Hoffman when he was explaining it to us. That's about discrimination in hiring.
Right.
This is a process that is less constrained.
But at the same point, we want to be transparent and we want to be fair
Fair.
to all the candidates. So that's, I think, where the rubber meets the road on that. And my second question is, in the past 3, we've had 2 candidates sitting side by side on the table, and the board members would ask those candidates questions. Do we have to get to 2? Because coming back to the fair question, if you have 4 candidates there, and candidate A gets asked the first question, by the time you get to the 4th candidate, they've already heard a couple answers, they've had a process to think about it, and they've got an ace question answered. So do we have to get to 2?
No.
And that comes back to the sequestering thing. If we're sequestering, you've got 1 person there. You don't have 2, you don't have 3, you don't have 4, you got 1. So are we trying to get to 2 so that we can get to that point where all the board members are asking 2 people all the questions?
So you get to wherever you get to. Like, you might
get
to 1, you might go from 4 to 1.
yeah.
I mean, hopefully you don't go from 4 to 3 to 2 to 1.
Well, there's only 8 votes, so think about it. You can go 2 for this person, 2 for that person, 2 for that person, 2 for that person.
Right.
Well, then we have to actually have more discussion and maybe not even ask any more questions.
That was my question when, and I'm okay with not going with the rubric, but, I mean, I wasn't being secretive about it, like, when I did it.
It was a great way to whittle down.
Right, and what we did was, after that first round of interviews, I was asked by, say, Ms. Heberly, okay, Mr. Hickey, give me your candidates 1 to 4. And I would state publicly, A, B, C, D, who I wanted. Ms. Polly, who are your candidates, 1 to 4? And then you tallied them up, and then you came up with a benchmark. You know, you could have anywhere from, you could score anywhere from an 8 to a 32, depending on how you were ranked from 1 to 4.
Right.
And then, you know, so somebody might have had, say somebody had a 12, somebody had a 15, somebody had a 24, and somebody had a 28. Well, there's a clear, you know, boom, we have, you know, you can eliminate 2, but everybody was public about where they, like, nothing was secretive about it. I stated to you, I'd like candidate A as my first, candidate B as my second, and so does everybody else. So we're not holding back. I mean, I guess the only thing about transparency, which you're really not supposed to, you know, if I went first and Mike said, oh, gee, I'd like that too, I'm gonna do that, you know, but he's still transparent about where he wants to try to eliminate people, you know, to at least whittle it down. And you could possibly even whittle it down from 4 to 1. If you have somebody that scores an 8, that means all 8 of us thought he was the best, or she was the best candidate. And then boom, we're done.
Let's put it to a vote, but this is what I'm.
Well, you know, we'd still have to go to a vote, but like, then it would go.
But you're starting to work towards consensus.
Right, you have a consensus, and then you can say, okay, I nominate so-and-so, boom, and then we vote on it, and, you know, but at least you have a way of doing it.
Can I just say that,
But
when I said.
but I'm okay
Yeah.
if there's an issue with the
But
rubrics.
but I'll say
you know,
this,
I
not all
understand.
rubric, if, what I'm saying is, if we all give the reason why I would say a ballot that's red, that says this is what Joe voted, it's not being non-transparent. What I'm saying is, this way, I'm not influencing, the first person that votes is not influencing the other people to come up with a majority because we can get this over with that. You know what I'm saying? So having a private ballot means that we're not just following one person, or people can say that. And I'm saying it's not being untransparent because the secretary is going to announce our ballots publicly, so we're not being, but this way, we're not influenced by each other. But if you're saying that that's an issue, and if you're okay with that, that's
You can
fine.
always, after you listen to the candidates, you can always, by your own self, rank your candidates. Who's your first choice, who's your second, who's your third? There's nothing that prevents you from keeping personal notes as to your preferences.
That's
But
not what I'm saying.
I know that's not what you're saying. I know that's not what you're saying. But there should not be a ballot, because that is a vote.
We're ranking them.
Well,
How are we gonna rank them? If we're ranking them verbally, then that's a vote too.
that's, yes, the public is hearing you rank them verbally.
I'm submitting pictures.
All right, sounds very technical, and as I said,
Well,
so
I think
it's, all I'm saying is we're gonna take the top 2. I think we're gonna have it done in the first round. If not, then we go to a second round. But the idea is we're all just gonna everybody state their top 4, and if we have one person that is number 1 for 5 of us, then we put it to a vote, and that's the end of the
This is what we did at the
process.
IU, right? When we-
Sure, whatever we
Yeah.
do at the IU is
I mean,
completely
that
fine
makes a
with
lot
me.
of sense.
I'm completely fine with whatever they do at the
The
IU.
problem with that, the problem with the IU voting and things of that nature is that there is a difference between election of a school board member, which is not, you're not allowed to have any meetings in private. You're not allowed to have an executive session, not even for, legal advice as to how to select your candidates. So and that is specific in the Sunshine Act. There's a specific exception to executive sessions. So whereas you did that when you were interviewing your superintendent candidates, or when you're interviewing your IU candidates, you were allowed to do that. That's
And we were
permitted.
technically in executive session.
Yeah. Mrs. McLean.
Thank you. So that's what I was thinking about, Joanne. This is, obviously it needs to, and this is why I said before, it's an uncomfortable process for the candidates and for us. It needs to be very public, and it needs to be very deliberative. And that's what I remember of the 3 other times, of going around and then saying, what's your preference? Who do you prefer? Or discussing among ourselves publicly, and as I keep saying, it's uncomfortable, but it need not be. And out of respect for our candidates, I'm ranking you, so someone's going to be last. Who would you prefer? All of our candidates are exceptional people, and we're lucky to have them.
Yeah.
So to treat this with respect and public, debate and discussion on it.
I hear you. I think the issue where I struggle with is, and I think you and I talked about this yesterday, how do we get down to that?
Yes.
The fours are tough.
Yeah.
The rubric offered that ability just to kind of break it apart. With that being said, we can't do that. So I think the board's got, I think the question we have to ask is, you can use the 2-2 and 2-2-2, how do we move on? And maybe we just do it on the fly. Maybe this is very organic, and, I know you said A, but where are you at with B? Because you have two people over here, I don't know, I'm throwing numbers out there, but Andy was great, Andy Block was great at starting that process, but he never had 4 in front of him, though. So that's where my sticking point. I mean, I like the idea of it being deliberate. I like the idea of being uncomfortable. I sat there for an hour and 18 minutes. It was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I have a thought and maybe a suggestion. So we bring the 4 candidates in at the table. We address the rules. We've agreed to this. They draw lots. We've agreed to that. And then 3 of them leave and we're left with 1. And whether they have 15 minutes and there's an opening and then there's some questions, some board members may ask a question, others may not. We go through each of the 4 candidates. Candidate 2 comes in and whatever lot it is, that one goes back. We get through all 4 of them. And at that point, we bring them back in and then we discuss if we need to. But at some point we have a board member saying, I make a motion for candidate B to return in the second round, right? And then maybe somebody else would second it and we could go through and then that person would advance. Or you could say, I make a motion that candidates B and C come back for a second round. And we go through effectively the selection process but through motions. Would that be acceptable? So that we can get an idea of if we're dealing with 1 candidate that we've already coalesced around, or if we're dealing with 2, or if we're dealing with 3. Since we can't do any sort of a ranking, we don't want to do that, and we want to be transparent, is there a way, like I said, do we have to get to 2?
No.
Or do we just keep on going around these candidates until,
Just to clarify, so we cannot do a ranking even if it's public?
You can do a rank if it's public. You just can't do it with a.
We cannot do it, yeah, but we can still.
You can say who your preferences is, you should be discussing,
You can
as
say
Mr.
my
McKee said.
preference
But we
is,
can't use Cuber.
okay, we can,
We could go around the room and say, Mr. Tate, give me your top 4.
Exactly.
yeah.
And then
Or
we could start putting together.
Right, or to Mary Ann's point, that's a little awkward going.
Top
to-
2.
top 2?
Top 2.
Exactly. Just say, who are your top 2? The other thing is, it's up to the chair, but, when these 4 people come back in, I might ask to speak and speak to what I heard. And, before we get to the top 2 selection process, we might want to have some discussion about what we heard. I do think we need to decide, the one thing you mentioned, Michael, 15 minutes. Did we decide on 15 minutes? I just threw that out there.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got 8 board members and a minute to ask a question or less and a minute to answer, that's going to be 16 minutes for 1 candidate.
Yeah, so that.
And then maybe you add 4 minutes for an intro and some over, so I don't know if that gets you to 20.
I think everybody should ask.
3 minutes intro.
Everybody should ask a question. So what is a fair amount of time for an answer?
I mean, at the board interview, was it like half an hour? So we made sure that there was enough time for someone.
So do we give 3 minutes, 2 minutes?
It's usually 90 seconds when we
It's not
get
going to be by
it.
question, is it? We're going to do it by question. We're going to say no more than 3 minutes answer to each question. We can say that. You can,
Yeah,
you
but
have,
that's, so that's 24 minutes a candidate times 4.
Times 4.
it's gonna be a long week.
Oh, I don't know, listen, that doesn't bother me.
But it makes sense to give them enough time. They may not use all the time, right?
Well, then that comes back to Mr. Tate's point.
Which is,
Yeah, I think the idea of 15 minutes per candidate, and we do a rotation among the board, so the candidate gets each candidate gets 3 or 4 questions.
no,
We
everybody
can't-
needs to be asked the same questions. That's not fair, that you, some candidates are asked different questions.
Is there a rule for that?
No.
So you can ask the same questions of every person, but that's not mandated because it's not employment law.
Yeah,
So
but
if
I'm
you
saying
want-
what is fair, not what is mandated, right?
Oh, it's not mandated.
Yeah, it's not mandated, but what is.
So you think in order to be fair, each candidate has to be asked a question by each board member?
Yeah,
The same one.
No, the same question.
same question, yeah.
There's no way to enforce that. I'm going to ask whatever question I want to ask of each candidate.
No, you ask your question, I mean, you're.
I'm not,
you ask
No,
different
I
questions
know.
to each candidate.
I might, after hearing this candidate's answer to this question, I might want to ask a different question. I don't feel compelled to ask the same question of each candidate.
Can you do that on your follow-up question, if you're not?
Well, I don't know, we haven't decided about follow-up questions. That's the,
Are we gonna discuss, know in advance what kind of questions we're gonna ask? I guess not, because,
I think we just got to get the skeleton together and go for it. So make sure we have enough that we
For
can follow the
tonight-
rules.
For tonight,
Please.
what we should be doing is getting your skeleton together and then tonight make a motion that this is the process that will be recommended to the board on Tuesday at the meeting. And then at the board meeting on Tuesday, there will be a motion to accept the recommendation or not. I mean, you know.
Raise new target.
And that way, then the process is adopted.
So let me just ask you for clarification, Mary Ann, you can jump in too. When you did my appointment, did you prepare your own questions ahead of time?
Yes,
Did you share it with other board members?
no,
So you came with, I don't know how, what did you think, 2? So you came with your, it had to be 2, because I got at least 2, maybe we were ready for 3, I don't know. But you had at least 2 questions prepared
that's right.
for each to ask. But my question was the same as the person next to me.
that's right. And to Ed's point, as I heard other people ask questions, that may have changed my question.
Okay.
You know, I may have eliminated one of my questions, or I may have changed one of my questions
On the
based
fly.
on what other board members asked or the response that I heard from the
But
candidate.
both candidates were asked the same question.
In that instance, they were.
Because they were both in the room.
I just don't think it's fair not to ask the same question, at least basically the same question.
Well, that's kind of where we're getting to. We get down to 2 where we can do that.
Sure.
And
You know? And how do you get to 2?
How do you get?
So one other point I would add to what Yoda's talking about, I may have a question prepared, and the candidate has inadvertently already answered that question. So do I need to re-ask
No,
that
no.
question when I've already heard the answer? No. I'd like
Do
the
we have-
flexibility
Well,
of asking a different question.
We can't agree.
not that I want to give the lawyer more work.
No.
Nah, I mean, like what, and I know what Yoda's saying about asking the same question, but there was basically, I don't want to say themes that were asked before, so there were not a repeat of questions. Like, if I asked a question that you wanted to ask, if they were prepared in advance, more like, you could eliminate that, like, you would ask your question and then I would ask a different question because, someone decided that, like like I said, we did this previously. We submitted questions and then someone went through them and came up with general topics. So we have 8 topics now that we're going to ask somebody, And so everybody got to ask, but I understand that you may not want to ask a question about subject A, you might want to ask it about subject B, so I'm okay if we do this, I mean, it's open, and do it on the fly, I'm okay with it, and.
All right, so if we organically make it, or we have a thought process for questions that may change on the fly because another colleague's asking. So I'll go back, I'm trying to keep track here. So to Yoda's questions, we're not going to ask the same question every candidate. Is that what we're talking about?
I mean,
I'd
I do have a problem with that, because how are you going to evaluate people when you ask them different questions? I mean, when you go for an interview, I mean, basically, you're asked similar questions. And then, of course, depending on your answers, maybe there's follow-up questions that are different.
So how do we handle that if there's two people on the board that do want, if they're in the, if she doesn't want to do it, how do we fix this tonight, come to a resolution right now?
Well, you can have a
we
motion
would-
to agree to a
Not tonight.
process
So
tonight.
can we do a straw poll saying who's interested in that, what she's saying today, just to kind of have an idea when you're drafting the motion? How do we come back? Because I think that that she's in the minority when it comes to that you are.
I have a problem with you even saying that right now.
But that's how we come, this is a board.
This is a discussion. We're just putting ideas on the table. It's not, oh, I like this one or I don't like. I mean, this is where we discuss and then we can influence each other, right?
I'm with you.
Okay,
But
then.
even
and
Edward
wherever
is
our
saying,
solicitor-
Edward says no, I think you're the only one that wants that. So how do we come to a resolution? I understand what you're saying.
Vote on it right now, can't we?
No.
Who thinks we should ask the same question to each candidate? Show of hands. And who thinks that we should?
But I think it's problematic. It's fine, it's one, you're gonna get one set of answers if there's 4 people there. And you're gonna get another set of answers if there's 1 person there. And we have to figure out how to get from 4 down to 2. Right? I mean, that's kind of where we're stuck. If we're gonna be sequestered, we can't sequester and have them all there at the same time. We can't have 3 people in this room and have 1 person there and have all 4 of them there. It doesn't work.
No, you lost me.
No, Yoda's just saying, we have we have
One set of eight questions ready to go.
Correct, we have 8 questions ready to go, here's candidate A. The other 3 are in another room. Candidate A leaves, candidate B comes in, they get asked the same 8 questions by the same people. Candidate B leaves, candidate C leaves.
Okay.
That's what Yoda's saying.
Right.
Ed is of the opinion, correct me if I'm wrong, Ed, that, no, candidate A comes in, and I don't want to say a free-for-all, but Ed can ask him whatever question he darn well pleases, and when candidate B comes in, if he wants to ask him a different question,
Right.
he can ask him a different question.
Is that right?
That's,
Mary Ann
am I
said, too.
reading, no, I'm just, am I reading you correctly, Ed?
Yeah.
And I think and I say, can we just vote on this now or say this is what I would prefer? Do we prefer to ask each candidate the same question by the same board member? Or do we prefer to ask any question we want to any candidate that we, to any, and the questions don't have to be the same. And we can do that now by a show of hands to say, okay, we're going to ask the same question, everybody, or no, we're not.
We can't vote.
We're not
We
voting,
can't
we're
get
just trying to
get an
go through the
idea.
motion.
Yeah.
And so, as long as there's no legal,
How about a compromise?
Yes.
Because this is.
So going through go through a first round and ask all 4 the
The
same
question.
questions.
That was going to be my suggestion.
Then,
Mine too.
then if you want to get down to 2, then at the meeting you have
I'd be
ask
satisfied with that.
who's your top 2, and for your second round, then you have your free-for-all.
That's right. And that's,
I was going to use
and
that,
that,
but I didn't want to.
and that was my point. That's what I was trying to make before. That in round 1, asking the same questions to everybody is I think everybody's probably in agreement to that. And then you need to get to round 2. And round 2 might be a little bit more open-ended.
Well,
what about
I would
follow-up
agree.
questions? Sorry.
I would agree to that if we're agreeing to a round 2. Because if there's not a round 2, then I don't like the idea of being locked in. So I think what Joanne suggested, what I hear you saying, Michael, is a good compromise. It satisfies everybody. I thought I saw Mary Ann nodding too.
Yeah.
I think you have to be able to give follow-up questions.
I agree.
In the first round, because some people will not make the second round if we're doing it right.
Well, then the first round would take 3 hours.
Well, let me tell you something. I think it needs to be fluid. I think based on one answer, somebody else is going to have a different question, as Mary Ann said. You guys can ask standardized questions. I think it needs to be fluid. I'm sticking with the original idea, because
Well, you can
if I
have-
really want to understand the person, standardized questions is not going to get me there.
I'm
You don't
sorry,
know
what do you,
that.
and what do you mean by standardized questions?
Meaning that if we can't follow up and get into more detail with the questions. Yeah, so we're still going to make some time limits, whether it's 25, 20, 25, 30 minutes. It's 2 hours of just around. If we don't dedicate 2 hours to this and put a time limit on it and make it a little more fluid, you can have the standardized questions ready to go, but we should be allowed to go off script if there's a different question that you want to ask.
That's for round 2, I think.
Okay, if there is a round 2 for some people.
No, that's what I just said. I'm one,
Round 2 of all 4.
no, that's not what I said, Joe.
All right, so you're going to eliminate 2 people based on the first round of
Quite
the
possibly,
standardized.
yes.
We could.
Quite possibly, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would hope that we would be able to come up with 8 questions that are correct,
Right.
that we would get that answer.
Right.
Exactly. I mean,
That we
not
would get
standardized.
that where we don't need to go into detail, we would
Exactly.
differentiate between the 8
And Bob,
questions.
this
that
is
we-
where we have to do our homework. We have to go in equipped with a list of questions that matter most to us,
That's right.
that are going to give us the information we feel we need to make the decision.
What's the most important item that Joe Hidalgo that he wants answered by these school board members? Bam, that's the
And you-
question, that's the question
And
you
if
want to
someone
ask.
else has already asked that question, you've got other questions in reserve.
Right.
That's where we do our homework to say, what do I need to hear
Right.
from these candidates to help me make this decision?
So in theory, the first round could be a little wonky because you may be going to your third
That's
question on
right.
your script. Then we need to formalize the questions that we've finally asked for the second and third and fourth person.
Candidates,
Does
exactly.
that make sense?
Yes,
Okay.
I
Well,
agree.
I'm hearing that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, so the first.
I'm coming in with
Yeah, so the
you
first.
asked all, because I'm at the end of the list. and we're
So
taking-
the first candidate essentially sets the template. We go through the first candidate, and that just sorted out the 8
So
questions.
then I would ask Donna to record each
Yeah.
question. So
Right.
we have it in minutes and then recorded, and then at that point, even Donna could ask the questions, because she has it in front of her.
Can I summarize where I think we are?
I have notes, go ahead, please.
Okay, because this is what I understand the compromise that Joanne suggested and so forth. So we're gonna have a first and a second round. And the first round is, to Yoda's point, the first round is 8 consistent questions from each board member. And we could keep the same order, I don't think it matters, but so just for simplicity.
How many minutes a question? Why don't we do that?
So if that's 2, then that's 16 minutes.
Right.
With a little bit of, there'll be a little bit of
So
fluff.
figure 20 minutes.
You'll get close to 20 minutes,
Right.
but shoot for 2 minutes per question.
I mean,
For the first round.
including asking the question or?
No, they're
Yeah,
on the clock
yeah,
once the
No,
question is asked.
They're actually given a time, hey, the time is now 8 o'clock, this first round will end at 8:20. And somebody can actually keep the time, you will have 8 questions. Depending on how long you answer them, you may not get to question number 8.
But then nobody.
I'm not against that.
I like that.
Here we go.
And you give them time.
Missing something.
Boom. And you give them a warning too when they're almost out of time. You
Yeah,
know?
okay, so, all right.
And if
so-
they finish up in 17 minutes, hey, would you like to add anything else for the last 3 minutes?
I like that, and then, all right, so.
8 questions ready to go, you have 20 minutes to answer
20
each
minutes,
questions.
and
Use your time accordingly.
And yes, and we have agreed to a round 2. Whether that round 2 is 2 candidates or 3 or 4 is to be determined by a vote of the board after round 1.
Correct.
But ideally, we get to 2. We could get to 1.
We could get to 1.
But
We could coalesce around
Could I
1.
say one thing? Opening statement, probably going to be 3 minutes. Opening statement
We
could
didn't discuss
determine,
opening statement.
what I'm saying is, I'm not trying to add it to the minutes you guys aren't talking about. They're gonna get a 3-minute opening statement, okay? That's what they do, that's what we're doing. That
Nobody
could
agreed to
affect-
that.
That's what we've always done, okay, let's just say we're not going to then, okay? But let's just say we are. 3-minute opening statement could affect the questions that I want to ask to get to know this person. That's what I'm saying, standardized I understand the idea of being fair.
No, no,
But when
I
the
think-
person
I
has
think-
an opening statement, I might want to ask them a little bit about their background. And if I have to ask everybody about their background, maybe I don't have a
But
question
we have all
for
that
everybody.
information
But
from
you have
there,
that
they've submitted all that information.
So I have a question about their background, is what I'm saying. So that's fine, you guys figure out what you want to do. What I'm saying, you haven't even talked about the opening statement, so add 3 minutes to the 18, to the 20, or at 25.
Are we going to allow an opening statement?
Okay, maybe we won't allow an opening statement, but that's been standard. Did you get an opening statement?
I did, but there wasn't 4 people.
Okay, so maybe we don't have an
So
opening
maybe we
statement, let's
do,
talk
maybe
about
we
it.
do 22 minutes, you have an opening statement and up to 8
Wow.
questions. You have 22 minutes to fit that in.
Yeah, this was, we brought this up, do we want to have an opening statement or not? I'm okay with an opening statement in round 1. I think that what we might be hung up on is the terminology of standardized question, right? I think that Yoda's point is she wants the same question. The same question doesn't have to be a standardized question. It's just a question
It's the same.
that Mr. Roosevelt asked.
Right, but I mean, is the opening statement something like the usual first question, which is, tell us about yourself and why you think you qualify for this position? I mean,
Well, technically, that's a question. It could be whatever they want.
Right.
It's opening statement.
I mean, if someone asks this question, then they don't need an opening statement. I don't know.
Maybe
If we
nobody-
agree that this.
Right,
will be on
nobody
the-
might care.
I'm fine with a 3-minute opening statement. I'm fine with roughly 20 minutes per candidate in round 1. And I'm fine with doing it one candidate at a time after they've all been told. And then I'm fine with us having a discussion on, after the first round, of do we have, based upon, do we want them all back for round 2 to ask different questions, follow-up questions, or do we only want a couple back for round 2? Right? And that process, I don't know how that's going to look. Maybe we have 3 rounds, maybe we have 4, maybe, I have no idea. That's, I think, the freedom that we have.
That sounds good to me.
Right? I mean, there may be somebody that we all like, there may be somebody that we may not. So we may like 2, I don't know,
Can
but.
I just point out, this is a very important decision for you guys. At the conclusion of the interviews, we will be voting, you will be voting on the election of the school board candidate. And we have to have the oath administered by the district justice. And if it's 11 o'clock, he is not going to be happy to come here. And
Yeah.
I just, right now, we have him set up to come in around 9 o'clock or 9:30 with him being on board with a telephone call. But
Take the cucumbers off your eyes. Come on in.
So I suggest dispensing with the opening statement, because we're going to be at 20 minutes per candidate without the opening statement. Because we're asking each candidate 8 questions in the first round. And there's always transition time and fluff time. So we're already looking at an hour and a half for round 1.
Right.
So I propose dispensing with the opening statement.
Do we keep the opening statement for round 2 or dispense with it altogether?
If somebody wants to ask, that could be your question. If you really want to know what qualifies them to be a board member, then maybe my question will be is, hey, candidate A, why should you be a board member as opposed to candidates B, C, and D? Well, if that's the most important thing to me. But if the most important thing to me is something else, then I'm going to probably try to ask something else. And if I want to know about his background and then you beat me to the punch, well, then I'm going to ask whatever I had as my backup question that I wanted to ask, or my tertiary question, whatever the case, you know. But like I say, like you said, you can't have an opening statement. If for some reason they're done before 20 minutes, You give them the opportunity to say whatever they want for the final
You got 3
minute.
minutes
You got
left
3
before
minutes,
there's no-
you got 3 minutes, say whatever you want, or next candidate, let's bring them in.
I like that.
So
Okay.
let me see if I understand this.
Round one.
There's gonna, the recommended process will be first to draw lots and see who goes first. Second, while candidate 1 is being questioned by the board, candidates 2, 3, and 4 will be in a separate room.
No phones.
Each candidate will be given 20 minutes. Each board member will have the opportunity to ask a question, one question. The set of questions that is answered to the first candidate in the first round is the set of questions that will be asked of all the candidates, 2, 3, and 4.
Right, we're good.
We're good.
Yeah, so far, so good.
And then,
At the end of the fourth candidate, we will have an open conversation, trying to find a consensus, either with 5 people towards one, or 5 plus, towards if one candidate's jumping off the page at you, or trying to, I hate to say eliminate, I would think 2.
Right.
To go to a second round that we have not discussed yet. And I think, to me, that should be a little more freestyle.
Are we gonna do the ranking like openly? Or
Yes.
you can ask everybody?
So for me, I think I would ask something like, who are your top 2, who are your bottom 2? Who are you leaning,
Yes.
and you use the word leaning. Who are you leaning towards your top 2 versus your bottom 2? Now, it may not be clear, it may be the opposite of somebody else, and that's the further conversation. What do we gotta do to get to 5 for a
Yeah.
candidate?
There's one other question, and I'm a T. I proposed alpha order for board questions. Does anybody have a better idea?
age.
Huh? Yeah, age is good with that.
Position left.
No,
and right, probably
you
did
got-
it before.
Please don't say gender.
I would stick with that.
Alpha order.
Yeah, now the problem is, the only issue is going to be is if one candidate whips through it, they're going to get all the questions, and one other candidate might get 3 questions.
Yeah, but that's,
But that's how it's gonna work.
yeah.
And that's.
I don't wanna change you, I think once you order set, whatever that is.
Oh, yeah, the same order for
You know what?
each.
And that's part of the process though, because if they know they have 8 questions coming in and they decide to dilly-dally on one question, that goes to their
Credit or their.
their ability to be able to function according to the rules that were laid out in front of them.
Yeah.
So,
And what about questioning on the second round?
Yeah.
Sorry to bother you, but what about questioning who goes first the second round?
Right, I mean,
We can reverse it at that point, Joe.
no, I don't, I would suggest reversing it at the second candidate, not the second round.
But they're not gonna get the same questions.
They are. The first round, they're getting the same questions. They're getting
Only if they,
consistent
only if
questions.
they get up.
Second
Not
round.
only if they get
I'm
through.
talking about first round.
I'm talking about first round.
Right, if they don't get through all
So
of them.
candidate-
And that's my point. That's what I want to talk about. Because if I'm the first person, theoretically, to ask the first candidate a question, right? I may take if they only have 20 minutes, what if I take 2 minutes to ask a question, and I ask such a complicated question that it takes them 5, 10 minutes to answer? And then Mr. Salmon goes next, and he does the same thing. And now, that's the same order. So now, the rest of us, whoever's left for the second candidate, will never get to ask a question.
What about
Because
2 minutes
we've enabled
each
the
answer?
candidate to filibuster, and we've asked a long time.
What
We
did-
can't do nothing.
Now, Mike, what did we do? You ask the question, so if your question is complicated, you may take a minute to ask it, and then the timer starts, and the person has 2 minutes to answer.
That's right. We're talking about the question ordering being the same for every candidate, and the questions being the same, and a fixed amount of time.
But
That risks
the
the
fixed amount of-
possibility that somebody will not get to ask questions.
It's not fixed amount of time.
It's not a fixed amount of time for the questions and answers, it's a fixed amount of time for the person to answer the questions, right?
That's right.
20 minutes.
So if you have
2 minutes
a
per.
5-minute question, he still has
Do
2 or 3 minutes or up to.
No,
No,
it's
we
not like
didn't-
that, but it's-
I thought we had agreed to 20 minutes. I didn't think it was, you're not going to start the stopwatch for each question, are you?
No, well, this is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So Mike's concern, I think you voiced it, but Mike's concern is whoever goes first asks some super complicated question that takes 13 minutes.
Yeah.
So in theory, the candidate's right, the candidates want to only get 3 questions.
That would be a big problem,
And if that order is the same, then us at the end of the alphabet, if we go in alphabetical order, we'll never get to ask the question in round.
Yeah, I guess I would just.
I don't think that's it.
Tell my
But to
colleagues
me-
right here and now, don't ask long-winded
No, but
questions.
to me, if a person has to take, if a person takes 10 minutes to answer the first question, then guess what? He better speed up his next 7 question answers, because if he doesn't answer the questions in 20 minutes, I'm going to hold that against him. Because these are the rules that I set out, pal, for you to answer the questions. And you didn't get it done. So you can't, like, why do I want you to sit on the board if you can't follow simple directions when you're going for the interview?
Yeah, but some of that is also the question taker is the point.
Just say, please limit your answers to 3 minutes, and we'll let you know what's going. If you go over, that's on you. But I would say, we're not voting on anything tonight.
No.
Get the skeleton
Well,
in,
there's
and
just-
let's go tomorrow, let's go Tuesday.
No, there should be a vote
To get a motion.
tonight
Oh, I
to
thought we weren't gonna
recommend
do
a
that.
procedure.
Okay, I didn't
There
know
should
this
be
was
a
a voting
vote to
meeting.
recommend a procedure. That's why I'm trying to make sure I understood what the procedure was. A vote to recommend a procedure that will be
Carried.
recommended to the board on Tuesday, and then the board will vote on to adopt or not adopt the recommended procedure. So you should vote to recommend a procedure
Right.
and set forth what that procedure is, and then on Tuesday, you vote to adopt the recommended
Are
procedure.
we able to vote at a committee meeting that wasn't published?
It was published. It was absolutely
special meeting?
published.
Yeah.
At the special meeting.
So
Okay.
I have a suggestion
Then
regarding
that's good.
question
I
order.
didn't think that.
Mrs. Haverly does a wonderful job randomizing
I was just
the
thinking.
way our roll call does. So why don't we ask her to randomly pick the order of our questioners and mix it up for every candidate that comes in? We're asking the same consistent questions. Each of us get an opportunity to ask a question.
Do you mix it up each time, or do you start at a different place in the order?
I try to change it up when there is a lot of votes. A lot of times it's unanimous, but when we do have to take votes, each person has a vote, I try to switch it up.
Are you, Yoda, that you're okay with that idea?
I read right
See,
off.
that's what she does. She uses the same list, but starts at a different point
Yeah.
each time. So it's not a change in order, it's just.
I
That's
can,
fine.
I have set
So-
that
Oh,
necessarily.
if-
are you gonna ask Mrs. Heberly to do it for us?
Right, to call on us in the same order that we ask the
Yeah.
question, and that changes for every candidate.
Every single time you're asking a candidate a question, I will.
Well, right,
Each
so
candidate
the
will be
first,
separate set
Yes.
of roll call,
Yes.
or
Yes.
call of order.
Yes.
right, so a candidate A comes in, and you do a roll call effectively to ask, call on the board members to ask candidate A a question. Candidate A leaves after their time or whatever we're
Right.
figuring out. Candidate B comes in, and you do a different order.
Yep.
And we ask the same, so I ask the same question, whatever I did in the first round, wherever I occurred in the round, my question is this. And then I'm in a different order for the second candidate, but I'm asking the same question. Right? Right?
Yoda, are you okay with that? I mean, statistically speaking, you could still run into a situation where you never get called.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean,
that's a time limit thing that we.
I'm okay with that. Yoda's comment early on was she wanted the same questions from the same people.
no,
The
but
the
that,
questions, in a perfect world, if you get through 8 questions, you're getting the same questions every time.
Right. So-
That's,
how, we should at least, when the person is getting the questions, maybe we can suggest they put a timer on their phone so they know how much time they have left.
You tell them, the time is now 8 o'clock. You'll be done
Yeah,
at
it's not
8:20.
gonna, it's not gonna be so
I mean,
exact.
I can do what I did for public comment and keep it, if you want me to chime in.
And you can say you have
18
like
minutes
that.
left, 17
that
minutes
many-
left.
Yeah, so they, because I'm also they're gonna be nervous, right? So it's harder to manage your time under stress.
Yeah.
So if we want to do it 20 minutes, let's at least help them
We can prompt
answer
them
as
along the
many
way.
questions.
Yeah, right.
Yes, you can tell.
I was going to say, that brings it back down to, do we have a full set of time for all answers and/or answers and questions? Or do we say, you have 3 minutes to answer each question that a board member makes and make sure we get around all 8? That's I think, where we're at right now.
I like the 20-minute block. If I'm doing an interview with somebody, they may ask me this question about math curriculum. I may choose to answer that question in 30 seconds. They may ask me a question how I feel about diversity and inclusion, and I may wish to go on 5 minutes. I think that's the candidate's prerogative. And if they don't get all 8 questions answered, you know, they still may have done a wonderful job. So there's some randomness to it, but I just say 20 minutes and have at it.
Yeah, and then when the second candidate comes in, if I didn't get an opportunity to ask a question for candidate A, there's a likelihood that I'm still going to be able, because
the rotation.
And so maybe all of us get to go, maybe a different 7 of us or 6 of us or whatever it is gets to go. But I'm good with that too.
But once your question goes into play, that's your question.
Yes.
Yes, no problem.
In round 1.
No, I'm just restating that.
Yes.
Round 2, we'll discuss that when we get Thursday night or Tuesday night.
I guess.
Or do we have to have?
You don't have to have a process, but my suggestion is that you consider how you want to handle round 2. And I think that's really going to depend on whether you have on Tuesday night, if you have come up with 2 top candidates, and those are the 2 top candidates that go to round 2. You could certainly say that if there are 2 candidates moving to round 2, this will be the process. Because it still leaves you the opportunity, if you have a consensus of 5 votes for 1 candidate after round 1, you still can do that. You don't have to have a round 2, but if you don't have the consensus, then you could have round 2 with 2 candidates, and the procedure would be.
So my first suggestion, if there are 2, I would be happy to bring the 2 in together.
Exactly.
Yep.
Absolutely. Right.
And
if there
Wait,
aren't 2.
are we good with that?
Yeah. I'm good.
Are everybody good with bringing them in together?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah. If we get to 2, they can come together. Or
And,
when we get to 2, they can
Right.
come together.
and then we start just alternating. And the same with, if we happen to have 3, we could just, again, just alternate. Question to A, question to B, you know, and just sort of work it like that.
And is that our opportunity to ask whatever questions we
Yeah.
want?
Right.
And they don't have to be the same.
Right, or follow-up questions, and they don't have to be the same, but
You
I
want
was,
there to be a time limit.
They will be the same because they're both couldn't be there, right? Or no?
Yes.
can I
Sorry, I'm
suggest-
sorry.
I would suggest that in round 2, Mrs. Haverly still go around and ask,
Yeah.
call on the board members to ask the questions.
Mhm.
And that between rounds, that we have a process where we discuss, have we
Yep.
arrived at consensus, or have we arrived at a top 2?
Publicly.
And then publicly, right?
Yep.
Yes.
And the candidates are in the room for this, correct?
Yes.
Mrs. Stone, right? So, and then the process happens, whether we have a round 2 or a round 3, and we just take it as it moves on.
What if we have 5 number 1s after round 1?
To be an
We
early
can make a
night.
motion.
Then you make a motion.
Make a motion.
Well, I just said, yeah,
Take the cucumbers out of the eyes and call the judge. Tell him what you're doing.
flying over.
So in the second round, when the candidates are, say, there are 2 candidates next to each other,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
going to be similar to what happened in the past, right? Because I ask a question, and then the candidate A answers first, and then candidate B answers the same question. And then Marian asks a question, and then they switch the order, right?
Yeah.
So it's pretty similar to
Yes.
what.
Correct.
I think what we've done in the past, when you get to 2, is a lot easier.
Yes,
A lot
we
easier.
know how that works.
Right.
Right. Now, but do we do that, do we have 3 sitting next to each other? I would submit no. I would submit that we have to get to 2 before they sit together.
I agree.
Or they stay 1 at a time. When we go down to 3, I think they still be 1 at a time.
One at a time.
Okay.
Right.
All right. Bill, you good?
No?
That's fine, I'm not good with this, but guys, keep going. Go,
What-
you have 5. I don't, it's not an open question, we need to be fluid, but that's fine, you guys have something, you don't need unanimous to go forward, I think you had 5. You don't need my vote, it doesn't matter what I say.
Joe, it matters what you say.
It does.
It
And I
does.
made it, so I made myself clear. I'm not gonna try to convince you guys. You're almost there, keep going.
Can you add something or amend something?
No, I
or
mean,
modify
basically I said,
something, or-
for, one at a time, you ask the top 2. If you don't get 5, you take the top 2 that, if it's statistically possible, and then put them together and do the second round. But again, it's gonna be different. The standardized questions, I'm gonna ask the same question. I might as well not ask a question, just
No, no, Joe, I
submit
think
your
you're-
question to the, I'm sorry. Submit your question to the, since it's the same question for everybody submit the question to the secretary and let her ask the questions, because I don't need to ask the same question to the same person all the time.
No, I think you're misunderstanding what we're saying.
In the first round, I'm talking about the first
You
round.
create your own question.
Whatever you want.
Sometimes-
That's your question.
Or a bag of questions.
I got you.
Or if Yoda goes
You
first.
can't ask them 10 questions, Joe, in the first round.
Did I say that?
I don't know.
I'm saying I don't want to ask the same question to the same person. It may not be the same question that I have. That's just an open, I don't
It's
like
your
the control
question.
process.
I misunderstand you. So
Because
you're.
based on what some other people,
You were
whatever,
going to
based
the-
on their answer for other questions, I may have a follow-up to that.
Well, that's your question then.
But it might be different for the next person after I hear what they say. That's
Well,
what
you
I'm
know what,
saying. So if this is a controlled process where I'm submitting one question, then I just submit it to the secretary, and she can ask the questions, because it's not gonna be different for any person. So they all get the same questions.
So Joe, do I understand you don't agree to having the same questions asked of each candidate in the first round?
I think if you want
Is
to
that what-
ask the same
is that
question,
what-
I think if you want to ask the same question to that candidate, then you should do that, if that's what you want to do.
But that's
I
not
let-
what you're agreeing with, Joe?
I just don't want to, I want a more fluid process. This is just me. I mean, is that how, I mean, I could be wrong, but if
No,
there's no law that says that, then I would say, I like freedom.
But
And
in
I like
this-
to have freedom of
Joe,
a free discussion.
I was in the exact same
You were.
place as you, and I compromised. That's
Sure.
all.
And that's fine.
I understand, I agree with
I'm
your point of view.
compromising.
I agree with your
I'm
point
going
of
to
view.
go.
So
and-
you're saying in theory, you could ask,
If the-
your opening question in the first round would be different or depending on the candidate.
I just don't see why I should ask a question if it's the same question in the first round. Let somebody else answer if it's standardized questions.
Can I make a suggestion? Especially consider time. If
Well,
we're
no,
on-
mine's standardized for each person. It's standardized, meaning that I'm asking the same question to 4 candidates, which is fine because we may end up getting down to 2 and the process will be fine. But to be honest to the process for me, I like a more fluid discussion or the opportunity to, than to be tied into that on the first round. Because I think we could get it done in the first round, possibly. Go ahead.
Thank you.
But I'm only one, so you guys have it. Go for it.
In the effort of time, can round 1 only be 1 question from a board member? And then if you want to ask a follow-up question, which I agree should be allowed and should be fluid, that's why you want that person to come back for round 2.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
I
Right?
thought that's what we had agreed
Yeah,
to.
that's what we agreed on.
Yeah.
I see your point.
Like, round 2, the questions don't have to be,
Yeah.
You can ask anyone.
That's fine. But I'm just saying, the 3rd or 4th person that doesn't get that follow-up question opportunity because they weren't out given the opportunity.
And Joe, I respect where you're coming from.
Because I mean,
I'm
my
gonna-
vote's my vote. and
I
it's
understand.
okay.
I respect where you're
So
coming
based on
from.
how we're doing this, somebody might be lost out. But
And what I just want to say again, the onus is on us. We have to do our homework and go in very clear-minded about what is it that I need to find out from each person here to make me feel confident that they would be a good board colleague and serve the district well. That's me doing my homework. It's reading through all the materials that have been submitted to us.
you should
You know?
have 8 questions ready.
Yeah. And
Because
really
what happens if
thoughtful
the 7
about
other
what do
people
I want
take
to ask.
your first 7 questions, and now Ms. Heberly says, okay, Bob, your turn, and I'm the last one, and everything I wanted to know, you guys already asked. And So you need,
You
you
don't
always
have to
have
ask a
8
question.
questions.
That's
You
true.
don't have to ask a question, Shanice.
That's true too,
Come on,
but,
guys.
That's true too.
Right,
Yeah.
you can skip, right?
That's true.
except,
Or your question could be a follow-up question to the answer that they provided for my question.
Sure. No, there's a process to getting done what I'm asking for, but it's just that this process in the first round is pretty rigid. I don't see the need for it, but that's fine. Go for it. Let's go.
I don't think we're too far apart, and I think you're raising good points which are similar with Mr. Pitts. And I think that all of us should be clear.
Original.
And I'm willing to compromise, to structure the round one
Sure,
that
I'm
way and
compromised.
round
If
two.
that means just say whatever you guys say, go for it.
I think that the 8 of us need to be clear when we walk out of this room so that we understand and the candidates understand what they're getting into. And I don't think that we have time to continue some of this if we haven't, to your point, agreed on a structure or a skeleton. But
Yeah, that was my whole point of having a discussion tonight, was so that we don't waste time
Right.
next week. That's all.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
I mean, I can go with Joe. I mean, I don't have a problem being very personalized with the questions on the candidate. How is that going to transfer over into, the keyboard warriors and people that have a problem with that?
Right.
That's what concerned me.
I think either way you go, it's
Oh,
going
it
to go
doesn't
bad, no
matter.
matter what. It's going to be a keyboard war.
Well, to
It
Ed's
always
point,
is.
I think it appears a little more fair to do the more rigid, to use your words, the more rigid. So I'll make a motion that we adopt the skeleton that we've been discussing, that Joanne just articulated, of drawing lots, 20 minutes, Mrs. Heberly rotates the questions among board members, and those questions be consistent for each 4 candidates in round 1, and then round 2 is a more freestyle format.
And the candidates are sequestered
And the
in round one.
They're sequestered in round 1, they're sequestered in round 2 if it's 3, they're together in round 2 if it's 2.
Correct.
Is that what we agreed to?
and however, I thought we had agreed to that in round 2, though, that Ms. Heverly would still.
She's still doing it.
She would still dictate the order of the questioner
Yeah.
in round 2.
Yeah.
I don't think that was one thing.
If she's willing, if
That
she's
is-
willing.
And, I'm sorry, Mr. Tate, did you mention the 20-minute limit?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Second,
No opening statement?
20 minutes in round 1, 20 minutes in all
cut
rounds.
out for time.
20 minutes in round 1, round 2, I don't know.
I don't care. Yeah.
A second?
I'll second that.
Second was Mrs. McKay.
Second was,
McKee.
McKay.
Is there any other comments?
We've said it, it's not, sorry, Dr. Senko had a good point. We've mentioned no phones. I think that's the assumption, it's not part of the motion. Needed.
When they're,
Sequestered.
yeah, but then they can use their phones.
When they're sequestered, they
No,
can use
when
their phone.
they're.
No, when they're
like
in
the
front
two
of
them,
us.
When this is only, when they're not interviewed, right?
They may want to have their timer.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't feel like taking phones away.
Yeah, I don't think we need to take phones away.
It's just when they're in sequester, that's very standard, so that,
Right.
not that we don't trust them, if it's an honor system, we can use it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
okay, too.
No,
But you should ask them not to.
we should ask them not to use their phones to communicate about getting tips. Maybe there's somebody in here, Mom.
And they can say, hey, you know what, look, everybody, I'm giving it to my wife.
Yeah, but I don't feel like taking people's phones. That's
No,
like-
well, you can ask, but no, but we're suggesting that we can ask.
Is there any other further comment? We have a motion on the floor in a second. Roll.
No, just ask for your
I
number.
don't think you need a roll call. And
Well, I think
So
we just have to.
who's
talk about
voting though?
phones.
I mean, do we have all yes or one no?
It's fine.
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
Just ask for unanimous vote, no one say anything. All the,
Is there any objections to this? No objections, hearing none, it's going to be unanimous.
Thank you.
Unanimous, Ms. Everly. Good. Now,
I move.
Mrs. Heverly, will you make
Hello.
sure we all get
Well, I know you get the minutes out, that you'll get the minutes to us, so we all know what the process is going to be.
Ms. Strong, is there any need for Dr. Sanko's office or anybody to email the applicants so they have a copy of this process when she's done the notes?
Does it have to be, isn't it, the minutes are going to be approved on Tuesday,
Right.
so they are unofficial until that time.
But the process is, it's been.
But you can let them know.
Well, if they care, they're listening tonight.
Hey, that's a good point.
It's on YouTube
It's
as
so-
well.
Right.
I mean, I'm just asking.
They just ought to be there at 7 o'clock.
Well, we might end up having another motion before then, at the beginning of the meeting.
We could.
To tweak
Sure.
something, okay?
We could.
Good job, guys.
Correct. And phones and sequester, the definition of sequester and what that means for phone use, I think is the only thing that.
Well, it will just be more of a polite.
Safer.
All right, I'm gonna close the meeting.
Wait.
Anybody have any issues? Right, is there any other comment from the board? Is there any comment from the public? No. With that being said, we have a question from the audience. State your name and where you're from, please.
Ms. T. LaFleur from Newtown Township. The 3 people who were sequestered in round 1, what if people inside the main field area with the first candidate are feeding questions to the 3 people that were sequestered?
And that's our concern.
There'll be
That's our
automatic
concern.
disqualification, in my opinion.
Well, how will we prove that?
I don't know. Well, that's why, I don't
Well, we're
know.
going to ask them to turn off their phones.
They're gonna be looking at each
If they
other.
don't do that, then that's on them.
And there'll be 2 other people in there monitoring, so if somebody's there on their phone like this the whole time, you know?
Yeah, that's what you're going to do.
Yeah.
That's all.
You know what, if you got a sheet to win, I won't even go.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. Hearing none, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
All right. Good night, good night, good night.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Yeah, I know that.